Hello, welcome back to Ready Steady Play. We got it together. How's everybody doing? So, yeah, there's been a little bit of a reshuffle around the studio since I've been away, but so yeah. But don't worry, we're all up and running. We're all up and running. I see Paul stop by to say hi. Thanks for checking in, Paul. I'm talking about your convention. So this is, of course, a debrief. I don't know why I'm wearing these. There's no music. I'm not monitoring anything. Um, I've just got back from Paul's convention, and I'm going to talk about it and the games I played there and all of that good stuff. And yeah, so it's just going to be sort of a casual chat. I was going to do this one with Chris today, but he's been real hard at work, and I am also feeling a little bit like spent from the con, um, as I think you can probably tell from the sound of my voice. So I'll be staying hydrated and trying to inform you about some of the games I've got. I've also got a little timer off screen here, so we can try our best to keep this stream on topic because we've got like 14 games to talk about, I think, and so it's not going to be an in-depth dive into each game, but more like sort of impressions from the play we got in at the con. But it's good. It's nice to see so many of you in chat. And thanks for joining me, and let's get right to it, I think. You should see from the thumbnail as well, and also in the description, the order I'm going to talk about these things, with, I guess, a brief, immediate... So obviously I'm not going to be getting everything out of the box and setting it up and everything, but I've got some photos to show you, exciting photos, terrible photos that I took. I guess I'll just do a quick shout-out, actually, to this game Kyrie, which I got a review copy of at Essen and is not in the list and is not in the thumbnail, but I wanted to mention it because it's this adorable little Japanese like samurai game where basically every player gets a hand of cards and you've got these samurais. And I've been bringing this around with me in my pocket wherever I go. And when we first arrived at the convention, we started playing this on the Thursday night, and it's just this I can set up. It's just two samurais, and then you've got these cards in your hand, blue player and red player, and everyone gets a single cool orange one-shot that you move. And the game, if it lasts 4 rounds, it's a long game of Kyrie, and they just move towards each other, and they smack each other, and when you get wounded, you have to turn over, and if you get killed again, you're off the board, and you can change your stance by flipping your card around. There's a little stance symbol here that tells people what sort of how you're looking. So this is a this is a bit of a mystery to me, this game, because I think it's kind of neat, and I've really enjoyed all of the little plays we've had of it, and it's a gorgeous production, but it's so short. It's so short, and it's over so fast. Amazing production, though. But you play it in like less than 5 minutes, and then once it's done, people are like, oh, I'd quite like to play that again. So that's a nice little game that I've been carrying around with me for a while. Kyrie, thanks, Difter. Got Difter in chat there. Speaking of chat, we can head over here. Boom, there we go. Now chat's on screen. You can see the spelling of Kyrie. So you can see I've got my first image up here. Oh my god, am I going to get through this? So I've been talking. I don't think I'm sick. I think I've just been talking for like 4 days straight at a convention, and now I've got no voice left. Mark says, I loved watching your old The Others vids the last couple of days. Thanks for those. Oh, Mark, I'm glad you enjoyed those. I'm pretty sure we played that game quite incorrectly. But I appreciate you watching them. Thanks so much for that. And whether or not we got the rules right, we had a good time. So, right, Mindbug. I got a review copy of Mindbug. I don't have any actual photos of the gameplay, tragically. I do have some copies here. I might show you some cards in a minute, but Dominic, who runs Nerd Lab, the publisher of this, reached out to me on the way to Essen this year, and he was like, do you want to come and get a bunch of Nerd Lab games? Specifically, do you want to come and get a bunch of Mindbug? And I'd sort of heard that it was like this light card dueling game, and I was like, great, I would love to come and check that out. And I brought back the 3 games in the Mindbug series. So they've had 2 Kickstarters for this. And I think First Contact is actually old box art, because Now it's just Mindbug. And then these are the two new ones, Beyond Eternity and Beyond Evolution. And Dominic very kindly gave me these 3 boxes. And it's Richard Garfield and a few other designers as well. So obviously Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering and Netrunner fame. He knows his card games. And this is a dueling game just like those other games. And I don't want to do anyone a disservice, so here's so there's also Scaff Elias, who's credited on this, Marvin Hagen, Christian Kudal. Oh my god. So this is really, really simple. It's a bunch of cards. Everyone gets a dial, which you set to 3. And that's your hit points. And then it's a bunch of cards. And they've got like a handful of keywords on them. But they're all just busted and broken as all hell. This is working good. But they basically got this number. And I'm not going to go into this much detail on every game. I just really want to talk about Mindbug. I've got this number in the top left there, and then they've got some card text at the bottom. This guy's just got 2 keywords: Frenzy, which means he attacks twice, and Tough, which means he can die twice, and that's it. But because his number's quite high, he's quite a good card. But basically the game is you get 10 of these cards, and that's your deck. You draw a hand of 5, so you've got 5 cards in your deck, and that's it. And on your turn, you either play a card from your hand face up on the table, or you attack with a card you've already got on the table, and your opponent has a chance to block it. And it's just trumps, so higher number beats lower number. If they're tied, they both die, and that's it. And if your attack is unblocked, your opponent loses 1 life. If you get them down to 0, then they die. And also, on your turn, if you cannot play a card and you cannot attack, you lose. And that's the whole game. It takes like 20 minutes to play. And the catch of these Mindbug cards, you each start with 2. And on your turn, on their turn, if your opponent plays a card and you're like, that's too broken, that's too busted, or in the context of the game right now, that's way too good, you just flip this over and it becomes your card. And you just take it from them. So you've got 2 Mindbugs. Each player has 2 Mindbugs. And the whole game is basically just this sort of... Because you don't know exactly what's in their deck, you don't know what's in your deck, you're basically trying to sort of get this board state to a sense. You're trying to get to this sort of state where the board state at the end of the game is going to be favorable to you, and that's it. And I just like, it's really, really good. Like, I actually think they added some extra rules in the expansions. In Beyond Evolution, you've got cards that add additional actions and can evolve into greater creatures. And in Beyond Eternity, they have this mechanism where you can take cards out the discard and slot them under cards to give them like +1 power. It's also got cards that do stuff when they're in the discard, but I almost feel like that's too much. Like, the simplicity and elegance of this is just, it's so good, and it's really compelling. And if you like these like sort of dueling head-to-head deck buildery type card game, like deck construction-y type card games, this really scratches that itch with literally no homework and no need to know the card pool. I mean, knowing the card pool helps, but also you don't need to, and it's so much fun, and everyone I've played it with has really enjoyed it. Paul popping in to say, Mindbug is amazing. I've done a few playthroughs on the channel. Yeah, Mindbug is amazing. It's really, really good, and it's so easy to recommend because it's also really cheap. But thanks, Paul. Thanks for checking in. Glad you're enjoying ATO. But yeah, amazing. Like, really, really strong recommend for Mindbug. And really grateful to Dominic for hooking us up with some review copies of this, because it's really, really good. Okay, Federation. This is another one I picked up at Essen. I tried to get this actually at Essen 22, and it was all gone. So I went back to talk to Explorate, who publish it, to see about getting a review copy, and they were very kind. They gave me not only a review copy, but a review edition of the deluxe copy. So I was very keen to get this to the table and try it out. So I was pleased to have a chance to do that. Federation is designed by Dimitri Perrier and Matthew Verdier, with art by Miguel Coimbra. And the publisher is Explore8, which is EXPLOR, the number 8. And I should mention as well that Explore8 were very keen for me to mention that it's been... They kickstarted it successfully a number of years ago. The Kickstarter was delivered to people in 22. It went on retail at Essen at 22, but it was mostly the Kickstarter stock. I think they've since reprinted it. I know that you can pick it up in the States via Eagle Griffin Games, who are publishing it over there. But I don't know. I think they've been looking for European distribution and also distribution here in the UK. And they mentioned to me at Essen that they had found that. So you should be able to get it via their website if you're interested. So it is a, and I've got some photos of this one. So this was the first game we played on the Friday morning. There was we played 4 players. I think it wants to be 4. At every other player count, you're blocking spaces off. And then at 2, you're playing special variant rules. So it really wants to be 4. Hopefully, let me just see if I can get some. So this is a horrible photo. I'm so sorry. I was playing games and I was doing my best. So this gray space that you can see at the top middle of the photo is actually the Senate. And if I find a player board, here we go. So you can see on the right of the player board, there's some numbered tokens down the side. And then what those numbered tokens are is they're called your ambassadors. And it is the idea is this is the Federation from Star Trek. And it's a conglomeration of space planets. So the Federation, we are all alien species on planets. We want to get into the Federation. We want to be accepted there. And so we're all competing to earn prestige points to prove that we're the best alien species. In practice, what we're playing here is a heavy Euro game. I mean, not super heavy. It's a 3.6 on BGG, which, for context, is actually not that not super heavy. What else is what is brass? So brass Birmingham is 3.9 and wingspan is 2.5. So this falls closer to brass Birmingham than wingspan, which is probably about right. But what you're doing is you're playing a number of rounds, 5 rounds, I think, and you're trying to prove that you're the best person to join the Federation, and you're going to be playing into that Senate, which is that central area of the board there. And functionally, you can see all these planets around the outside, the blue planets on the bottom left there, the pink planet, which has got a whole bunch of tokens on it, the yellow planet, which has a bunch of spaces on it. There's some green planets at the top you can't really see. These represent the other areas of the Federation, and they're all kind of interlinked mini games. And I mean, some of them, like the blue planets, are just kind of tracks you're going to go up, and you're going to get these tokens that are upgrades that are helpful. On the pink planet, you meet these other aliens, and you get to bring them into your tableau, and they give you powers that are helpful. On the yellow planet, you can trade resources and things for other things. Where this sort of becomes really interesting is that you can see on the Senate board it's 2 grids of 9 spaces. And those are the action spaces. And when you play into those spaces, it's got all these different effects that are sort of interworked. So playing into those spaces, there's 2 main kinds of action spaces. The planet spaces, which let you take actions specifically associated with the planets around the outside of the board, and the Senate spaces, which let you do things like gain sort of extra power, extra money. You can you can't see it at all on this player board, which is barely set up, but there's a die that's an assistant, and you can get that assistant, or you can trigger all of these blue missions in the middle of your board. Well, not trigger them, but set them up to be triggered. And what you've got down the side there, your ambassador tokens with the numbers on, and they're double-sided. And when you're playing them into the Senate, you must decide, these are your action tokens, so you put them down on the action you want to take, and yes, they block each other. It's basically worker placement. But when you put them down into these spaces, you want to pick the number that you want to pick whether they're on the number side or the funding side. More on that in just a minute. But the number side is the number of votes, and those votes are going to have basically ramifications for end of round and end of game scoring. So it's kind of like you play one token, and this just triggers a cascade of effects that determine what kind of points are going to be scored at the end of the round, what kind of points are going to be scored at the end of the game. It's going to determine what action you're going to take right now. And based on whether you put it on the voting side or the other side, it could determine what sort of extra benefits you trigger as well. And this was just awesomely crunchy. Like, I played this with this was, I think, actually our runaway sort of hit of the convention. I mean, with the exception of Guards of Atlantis II, which, was a little bit more polarizing for some of the players, but I'm a big fan of Guards of Atlantis II, and I'll talk about it a bit later. But that was the game I brought to play just because I want to play it, and I love it. But this is a sort of a solid meaty Euro. It's not too heavy, but it's quite heavy. It took 4 of us who hadn't played before about 3 hours, and we all had a really good time, and we were invested throughout. And we play a lot of Euro games, and everyone really liked it. So, I think a high praise for Federation. I'd be more than happy to play it again. I think that, it's... The deluxe edition has 2 boards in. I hope they're in the standard edition. I don't know. The board is double-sided, so you've got sort of a bit of variance there for for setup and things. But there's just like there's a lot of timing constraints going on. Like, you're really interested in what people are doing on the pink planet when they're going to take that action, what they're doing on all the different planets, and where they're putting down their vote tokens, if they're even putting down their vote tokens, and if they're not, they're putting down funding tokens, and then you're interested in what projects they're funding. So there's just like all these sort of layered ramifications, and you care about all of it, and you want to keep your eye on all of it, and you can't do everything. So it keeps you engaged, and it's a strong recommend to try this out if you like heavy Euros. Like Terra Mystica is a good example of a game that you're sort of engaged in that has player interaction that's a heavy Euro, or a reasonably heavy Euro. So if you like that, if you like Brass, if you've been into Autobahn or sort of these heavy Euros that have been coming out recently, this one's definitely worth a look in, for sure. So that was a strong recommend on that one. Right, Evenfall. So I played this actually at Essen, and I signed us up to play it because the guys I was going to the convention with wanted to play it. We played it at 4 at Essen, and we played it at 4 at the convention. It's a 1 to 4 player tableau builder with worker placement as well. It's got asymmetrical player powers, which we were using. You can play a basic version that doesn't use them, which we played at Essen. You can play these asymmetrical player powers, and you're a witch's coven or a wizard's coven, and you are acquiring what are called sacred sites. So I don't know how well you can tell from this photo, but there are these 3 boards that are across the table in the middle here, and you can see someone's tableau. This is kind of at a jaunty angle, but someone's tableau down here in the bottom left, and you're effectively drafting these sacred sites from these 3 boards in the middle here, which form 3 marketplaces, and you'll send your witch workers, your little witches out there to grab the sacred sites, and they'll come into what's called your outer circle, which is the top line of the tableau there in the bottom left. And then you will also be able to grab these ritual cards, which are the black-backed cards you can see around the table, and you'll be able to... The ritual cards are dual purpose. There are 2 kinds of cards in the ritual deck. One is can't remember what they're called. Specialists. They're called specialists and council members, but they're people, basically. And they'll either go to the left of your player board, like you can see there's 5 of them lined up to the left of the player board here, and then they give you passive powers during the game, or you can slot them into the bottom of your player board, Like you can see there's one slotted into the black player board here, and then they give you scoring, either during the game or end game scoring. And so if they're not the people cards, then they are what are called ritual cards, which have different types and keywords as well. But the ritual cards are played into the sacred sites. So you can see a number of the sacred sites in the black player's tableau here have ritual cards on them. And if you put them onto the sacred sites, they trigger benefits, and then you can upgrade them with tokens as well. So it's a tableau builder where you're auditing 2 different decks. Well, you're drafting from 3 marketplaces, and then you're auditing a deck of black power cards. You're auditing this deck of power cards to put out into your tableau and onto your cards, and then at some point you want to bring them from the outer circle to the inner circle, because they only score points at the end of the game if they're in the inner circle. And it's a compelling sort of tableau mechanism. We quite enjoyed it at Essen. I quite enjoyed the second play at GRiDCon, but I think it's weird because there's so much comboing and so many actions on a turn. Like, you actually only have 4 witches, which is not very many. You've also got 4 wizards, but the wizards can only use action spaces that are on the ritual cards, and only if the ritual cards are in the inner circle. So they're kind of like, they're a bit useless until you set them up. So you can see the black player actually has 2 action spaces on the inside of their inner circle here that they can put those wizards onto. And yeah, it's a very compelling mechanism, or series of mechanisms. I really like the sort of comboing of the power cards with the sacred sites to sort of create these unique tableau elements. And I really like that you can unlock these actions. There also seem to be sort of multiple different routes to points and victory, and you can set up asymmetrical endgame scoring as well, which is really nice. And the artwork is really, really nice. Oh, it's really good. The artwork on this is exceptional. However, it's only 3 rounds, and at 3 rounds, it still feels like it's overstaying its welcome. I think it probably wants to be 2-player. And that's a bit of a pity, because one of the things that actually attracted me to this game is that at the end of a round, on each of the 3 marketplace boards there where you go to draft the sacred sites, battles will take place. And so you can see actually at the very top of the 3 boards, there's a yellow track. It's quite hard to see in the top center of the photo. But that's the mana track. And there's this mechanism where these battles will take place on each board, and you'll get a number of sort of combat points equal to the number of meeples you've put on that board to grab the cards or take actions. And then you can also secretly bid mana, and then everyone will turn over their dials to reveal how much mana they bid, and whoever has the best total combat points from their mana and meeples will win the combat and gain a sacred stone, which in theory is a mechanism I really, really, really like. I like combat, I like secret bidding, I like that we have to manage our mana. But in practice, in both games of this that I've played, the mana tracks have pretty much tapped out. So everyone was on like 20 mana going into the combat, and you can only bid a maximum of 9 mana per combat. So then it's like, well, which combat is someone not going to use all of their mana on? And the other thing is that there's actually combat rewards for getting up to a certain amount of combat power. So if you get 8 or more combat power, you unlock all of the combat rewards, which you get whether you win the combat or not. So the only real prize for winning the combat is the Sacred Stone, which is very valuable to the red player if they're playing on the asymmetrical board, and it's okay for everyone else. It's like worth at best like 7 points, and at worst 0 or 1 or 2. It basically doubles the value of 1 card set in your inner circle, but only if it matches the sacred site with an icon, and only then will it double the set of cards, and they may be worth up to 7 points. But in this game, you score a good score at the end of the game is like 150, so 7 points is okay, but it's not something to write home about or focus on if you've got a different strategy. So I was a little disappointed how little bluffing there was in the combat, and how the sort of winning it was, sort of not a majorly exciting element of the game. So I think Evenfall, I was happy to play it. I don't think I'd play it again at 4, because I don't think the combat is really manifesting what I want from it. I'm also not convinced it's really really sort of making the most of the blind bidding mechanism either. But I think I'd play it at 2. I'd probably happily play it at 2. 3 at a push if that was what was going on, but I wouldn't pick it. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd only play it if someone was desperate to play it. But it's a tableau builder, and it's a combo-y tableau builder, so I guess check it out if you really liked Revive, or if you really like Wingspan or Terraforming Mars. Right, Sea Salt and Paper. This one, this is a tiny little card game that my buddy bought, and it is designed by Bruno Cathala and Tio Riviera, who have done some collabs together before, and of course, long design mini games, and it has gorgeous little art. All of the cards have origami on them. They look great. It's published by Bombix, who have published lots of cool little games. Recently, I think they did Nar as well. I think that was them. Well, I hope I'm not wrong. And it's on BGA, according to Cheticus, so that's good. So you can go and try it on BGA if you like. We were playing it as sort of our end of the night. We've been drinking a lot and playing a lot, and now we're just having this sort of little card game going on. And basically, you've got these cards, and they have different colors on them and different creatures and things. And what you want to do is, basically, you've got the deck in the middle. You flip 2 cards over, one on either side. Tragically, I don't have a photo of this, I don't think. Let me have a quick look. Nope. So, you've got 3 cards, 3 options. You take from the top card from either discard pile, can't hunt through them. Take the top card from either discard pile or the top card face down from the deck. That's not true. Take 2 cards face down from the deck, pick one, and put the other into one of the 2 discards. And then you're making pairs, and the pairs will give you different benefits. So you'll either get powers or you'll get points, or both. Well, you'll get both. So you make a pair of crabs, that's 1 point, and they let you hunt through the discard for a card you need. You make a pair of boats, they give you 1 point and let you draw the top card of the deck. Or maybe it's take another turn. There's another creature that lets you go through to draw the top card of the deck. So there's these pairs that let you sort of do little powers. And then you can also get seashells, which are a set. So the more seashells you have, the more points you get. You've got actually there's a lot of set collection, and it's just sort of different varieties. So there's 2 sailors. There's only 2 in the whole deck, but if you get them both, it's 5 points. But the big there you go, Chaticus correcting me on the rules there. The big and then there's also these mermaids, where they are going to give you points for collecting sort of the same color cards. So if you get a bunch of the same color, like a bunch of the yellow cards, there's about 8 or 9 colors or something. If you get a bunch of the same color card, you can get big points off the mermaids. And if you happen to collect all 4 mermaids from the deck, you just immediately win the game. But it is played in rounds, so you'll probably play the game more than once in a single session, unless somebody gets the mermaids. And the big deal is that when you get to 7 points in your tableau in front of you, and also including the cards that are secret and in your hand, you can call out score, and then everybody just stops playing and you score your hands. And you hope to have the most points. And we write down everyone's scores, and then we keep playing until someone hits the benchmark points required to win the game. So 30, I think. It varies on player count. And or if you don't want to call score, what you can call is last chance. And if you call last chance, then everybody else gets another turn, and when it gets back to you, you reveal your hand, and if you have the most points, you're going to get a bonus based on, it's actually the mermaid score again, so you count up your most colors, and then you get that in addition to what you would normally score. But if you don't have the most points, everybody else gets to do that instead. But if you do have the most points, in addition to the bonus, also everybody else only gets their bonus and doesn't get to score their hand. So that's like a big swing. So the last chance is sort of the main strategy of the game. It's like, how well do you think you're doing? Did you keep track of what everyone else has picked up? Did you keep track of what colors they've got? You know, can you bully the leader? That kind of stuff. I can see Dan's in chat. Dan was playing this with us. I was terrible at it. I lost every game by like a wide margin, but I really enjoyed playing it. It's a really nice little game, and it's very, very quick. And I like the sort of, I like the element of like push select. Like, do you keep trying to get cards? Do you keep trying to go for it? Or do you just sort of tap out and say, you know, score or last chance? So it's really nice. And it's super cheap. So that's a nice little one to check out. And you can, we can get a game going on the Patreon as well, on the Patreon Discord, on BGA. I don't know how many it goes. It says it here, it plays 2 to 4. Best at 2. Is it community? We only played it at 3 and 4, and I liked it at both counts. All right, so now we've got Old King's Crown. Now this is on Kickstarter at the moment, actually. Me and the crew played this at UKG about 18 months ago, so it was UKG 22, and we knew another content creator who had a prototype copy that he'd been using to make content for the campaign, and he'd brought it with him, so we decided to play this. And here you can see it set up. And Old King's Crown is basically a bluffing game where each player is an asymmetrical faction. It's let me get you some stats, or not stats, some credits before we get too much into it. Right, so this is designed by Pablo Clark. The art is by Pablo Clark, and it is published by Eerie Idle Games, which is a publishing company set up to publish this game. And it's on Kickstarter right now. So very much a author and sort of self-publishing creator. And I will just quickly call out, I'm sure they won't mind me clicking on this image here, but the art in this game is absolutely phenomenal. Pablo Clark's art is incredible. I mean, I think you can sell this game just on the art alone. And the art in the prototype is all really, really good. And it's only going to get more unique art as it goes on. But it really helps to communicate the sense of this world that they're trying to create, right? And in this world, what you've got are these 4 factions, which are vying for the throne because the king has died and they're vying for power. And so you've got these 3 regions you can see across the middle there, with each region has 2 locations in it. So there's 6 locations there that you can see. And the along the top there are something called the court. That's the far left. Then there's the turn order next to it, and then 4 things which are the questing locations. And along the bottom you've got the King's Road with some cards on it there for us to pick up. And you can see there's a couple of cards actually face down next to the top region and the middle region. Those are war machines that have been deployed, but what I'm trying to say is that what we've got is a deck of cards for our asymmetrical faction, and we're going to be putting cards each round face down next to those regions, and each card has a power and potentially an ability, and so everybody bids 1 card per region, and then we all flip them over, and whoever has the best, strongest army in that region is going to get to take an action, and everybody else will not. And what you want is to get the actions so that you can complete your objectives in order to earn influence and win the game, because it's first to 15. So it's a racing game to get to 15 influence. First to 15 wins it. You'll finish the round that someone hits 15. So there is a chance that multiple players will be tied or on more than 15, but that's how it's going to work. And what we've got here as well is these heralds. So a round basically has 4 seasons in it that are the 4 phases. And it begins actually, near the start of the round, you'll put these heralds out as well. And the heralds are sort of like, they're quite they're kind of fun. Like they're like bluffing tokens, right? So you put them into the location, and it basically says, "I really want to win this location," and if you do win it, you're going to get extra influence. But if someone else wins it, they're going to steal influence from you. So that's a bummer. But or at least I think maybe they both have to have their heralds in there. I can't remember. Anyway, the deck itself is made up of largely of cards with numerical values, and the numerical values are like trumps again. But also there is an assassin card in there which kills everybody in the conflict, and so it sort of trumps all the numbers. But then it can be blocked with a shield if you've got a shield card. And then some cards have different things on, like cards with authority can be sent to that court space up near the turn order, and then they earn you influence every round. Cards with the quest keyword can go up to the 4 quest icons in the top right, and then they can unlock better cards for your deck. And the cards with the deploy mechanic can be placed face down like the 2 you see here, and then they can be brought into the fight if you think you're losing. And so this is all very similar to the game we played 18 months ago. The one thing that's new is this King's Row along the bottom. And the game we played 18 months ago, I played it 3-player with Michael and with Chris at UKG. And we got taught it, we played a single round, we learned it real quick, and we were done in under an hour. Like, it was super fast and super quick, and once we knew what all the cards did. And Chris was playing the purple faction, who are asymmetrical and particularly weird, I would say. Like, of the 4 factions in the game, the purple faction want to like lose fights, and they get influenced by basically losing fights and then amassing it on some ability cards. And obviously I haven't gone through all the rules, but the functionally it felt like the sort of the sort of the crux of the game was pick a card from your hand, play it face down into the regions. You play 3 cards per round. You have 5 or 6 in hand, and then you draw back up at the end of the round. And so it's like managing this hand and managing which conflict you want to go into and what are you going to prioritize, right? And so then with the game we played at GRiDCon, which is the one that's live on Kickstarter right now, has this King's Road added to it at the bottom, which is like it's resolved in the same way as the regions. So everyone plays a card in there, and then they're all flipped over. But instead of the cards killing each other and the best number winning, everybody's going to get to draft a card from the 4 card offering. If they played a card down there, you don't have to. And with the highest number drafting first. And those 4 cards are bonkers powerful and really break the game in significant ways. Like, they really develop asymmetrical powers over the course of the game. They give you really crazy abilities. And later on, when you play into the King's Road, you can elect, instead of drafting a card from the offering, you can actually go and attack other people's boards and steal the cards that they've got instead. So if somebody gets a particularly powerful card and you don't want them to have it anymore because it's super good, you can go and get it from them. This added like an hour, or not an hour. Okay, so we played it in like 60 minutes at 3. So at 4 players, it's probably a 90-minute game. But we were at 4, and it took us like 2.5 hours. Like, this added like an hour to gameplay, and it added in a bunch of like crazy complex asymmetrical mechanisms. I'm not sure I liked it better. I kind of wish that there was an option to play it without that. I really liked it before that board existed as a sort of a quick and dirty bluffing card game. That was still reasonably meaty. It's still a 60 to 90-minute game, but the rounds are super quick and super snappy, and you're not reading all these crazy power cards and tracking what everyone's got. And I don't know, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I played it once already and had a sort of a really good time with it. And this time we were looking up rules a lot and checking things, and heavy caveat, both times we've played with a prototype. Second heavy caveat, when we played it the first time, we had the designer there with us, demoing it. And the second time we didn't. And that's a big deal, because when you have someone there who's across all the rules and can answer every question right away, it speeds up the game. And of course, it makes sure you're not heads down in a rule book looking things up. So you always have a better time with someone who's curating the experience. So it might just be that the first time we played it, that was why it went so smoothly and we had such a good time. But I don't know about these powers. I don't know about this King's Road. I'm not yet convinced. But for what it's worth, the game without that, when I played it at the demo, I really liked. And the artwork's fantastic. Good night, Dan. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good sleep. All right, Dune Imperium. So we're now up to, that was Friday. Old King's Crown was the end of the day on Friday. And now we're up to Saturday morning with Dune Imperium, with all the expansions. So this was one of my friend's picks. He brought it because he loves it. I've played this with him a bunch already. I played Dune Imperium solo on the channel a few times. And obviously this is published by Direwolf Games, and it is designed by Paul Dennen, who is famous for Clank, which is another deck building game. This is a deck building game. It is also a worker placement game. It is often compared to Lost Ruins of Arnak, which I can see why people do it, because they're both deck building worker placement games, but they couldn't feel more different. Lost Ruins of Arnak feels very, very Euro-y and is probably best at 2. Dune Imperium feels much more dynamic and much more conflict-oriented, because every round there is a conflict, which I think I show in the second photo. Well, it's here and then... Oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Where are all my photos? Okay, I'm going to have to fix this in a minute. But Dune Imperium has this conflict, which is sort of a bidding mechanism where you're bidding soldiers into the battlefield. So Dune Imperium with both expansions, we played it at 4. It's best at 4. At 3, it's the same game, but it's just less vicious because there's more spaces available. And at 2, you have to play with an AI, and at 1 player, you have to play with 2 AI. I played it solo on the channel. It's fine. It's not something I'm going to pick to do. If I have a choice, I'll play this at 4 every time. I think it's best at 4. It's with both expansions, it's quite a long game. It's probably 3 hours. But it's widely popular. It's currently 7 overall on BGG. And I think one of the reasons it's so popular is because it is obviously the Dune IP, which is popular. And it is, I think it's just very accessible. And I don't mean it's accessible in the terms that it is simple to learn or easy to understand or even easy to understand how to do well. It's accessible because the rules are fairly straightforward. It's very infrequent that you would have to look something up in the rule book. And when you do, it's usually quite well spelled out and clarified. We very rarely have sort of rules issues in it. I mean, quite often things will come up and people will be like, can I see the rule book, please? And you'll look it up. But the other thing about it, though, and it does kind of the same thing actually the board game Heat does, which is that there's a really sort of, it's sort of, where Heat has a bit of rubber banding, right? Like the person in last gets this benefit to get forward again. And also in Heat, you're kind of cycling the same deck over and over again. So Heat has a habit of sort of equalizing players' positions. And really, you could probably just play 1 lap of Heat and the same kind of result would come out that you would get after 2 laps. I mean, I'm not saying the same player would win. I'm just saying that the way Heat works, it's hard to sort of consistently maintain a lead through really strong play because of the way the back players get a benefit to catch up again, and the way the decks cycle. So, having said that, Mark wins Heat quite a lot. So, and in this, it's kind of the same. Like a lot of the scoring is couched in, a lot of the big points are couched in the end of the conflict deck. So Dune is managed through the conflict deck, which is the little red swords you can see in the 3 red spaces next to it in the middle left of the picture. And the conflict deck is flipped 1 conflict card each round, and when it runs out, that's the game timer and the game's over. but the game can end before that. In a basic game, it's when people hit 10 points. You can play an epic game that goes up to 12 points. But the conflict cards are rarely worth 1 point, and then it's a segregated deck, so it goes from phase 1 to 2 to 3, and when you get to segregated deck, and when you get to phase 3, all the cards are worth like 2 points. So there's a huge amount of the game's points, like 6 or 7 or 8 points on offer once you get to the level 3 cards. The other way you're going to get points is making friends with the factions. There's 4 factions in the game. They're worker placement spaces up the left side of the board. So there's like loads of different kinds of worker placement spaces here. You can see there's a bunch on Arrakis there, which I'd love to zoom in on, but that photo's gone. But when you play into the faction worker spaces on the left side of the board, you develop or you gain influence with that faction, and you have a marker that moves up a track. And on that track, there's 2 points available. The first point is for hitting a certain amount of influence, and the second point is if you have the most. You hit a milestone, and then also you have to have the most. And you get an alliance with them. So there's 8 total points available on the faction boards, but 4 of them are available to everybody. And then after that, the points are either hidden in the Intrigue deck, which is the mysterious intrigue cards you can get from dealing with the Bene Gesserit. If you know the IP, that's the mysterious order of mystics. But if you don't know the IP, it's a mysterious order of mystics that give you mysterious cards. And the intrigue cards do all kinds of things. They give you resources. They can be used in combat to give you power. They're not multi-purpose. Each card has one purpose. But what they do a great variety of things. And very rarely they give you endgame scoring. The other thing you can do is you deck build with a currency called influence. There's a limited marketplace for the cards, and but there are, just like most deck builders, there's a few cards that are always available, and one of them is called the Spice Must Flow, which gives you a point when you buy it, and its whole purpose is to allow you to buy points through the deck building mechanism. And I think that it's, if you don't get, I mean, there's a few rare examples where you can sort of score in weird or outlandish ways. But by and large, you're going to get most of your points by developing your influence with the factions, and then by winning a bunch of conflicts at the end of the game. And so it's very difficult to have a runaway leader. It's very hard for people to actually earn points. It's a 10-point game, first to 10 points, And I think that makes it feel like you are in with a chance throughout the entire game. Like, it's very rare for someone to get sort of locked out of the game entirely because so few points are available, and it's very difficult to just win combat after combat after combat unless you've built an incredibly strong deck, because everybody else is fighting with you, especially at 4-player. But I think if you haven't had a chance to play Dune Imperium yet, you definitely should give it a try. I'm not convinced it's a great design, but it almost feels like gambling to me, Dune Imperium, every time, because it's so random. There's definitely skill in it, and you can definitely sort of like mitigate the randomness, and players who are good at it will consistently do well at it. But it is an incredibly random game, and I think that for players that play it a lot, it's quite enticing, to try to overcome the randomness and play again and again, right? Like, it's odd. We talk about replayability, and when we talk about replayability, we talk about developing a skill, like getting good at something. And I think there's a really low skill ceiling on Dune Imperium. And then after that, it's just kind of like, you've got the skill ceiling, you understand how the scoring works, you understand how the basic mechanisms work, and now you're basically just sort of going in and gambling. I think that, that gamble is just very compelling. My little group really likes it, aside from the grafting expansion. I really like the grafting, John. I thought that gave the deck building a nice sort of refreshing combo element that I really appreciated, because otherwise the deck building is extremely limited and based almost entirely on whether or not the cards you need come out and whether you can access them when they do. There are factions within the deck as well, within the cards you can buy. So you can buy cards for the spacing guilds, and those all work together. You get the Emperor cards; they all work together. The Fremen cards all work together particularly well, as do the Bene Gesserit cards. But you're limited based on how many of those cards you get and how many you see, and you'll barely see half of them in a given game. So the Tylexu expansion adds a second marketplace, which adds these forbidden technology cards. If you understand, not forbidden technology cards, that adds the Tylexu cloning cards. The Ix is the forbidden stuff, but that's not cards. Those are asymmetrical player powers in the form of forbidden technologies. But the grafting cards can be played from your hand to join up to another card and sort of expand it. Brian says, I have fun it every time with this. Solo 2. We do 2-player with the Hegel app. I just received Uprising and I'm looking forward to that. John says, the grafting mechanic is quite fun. I just feel I'm the only one who uses it. Well, John, you've just got to win with it, and then everyone will want to get on board. I really like the grafting mechanism. I mean, one of the really nice things about Dune is that the cards are multi-purpose. Fundamentally, you play them on a turn to allow a worker to access a worker placement space, and it gives that worker special power when they do. So that's one of the things you're deck building with. But the other thing the card does is at the end of your turn, you will have more cards left in your hand than you had workers to place, because you're only ever going to place a maximum of 3 per round unless you have a very special power. But more cards than 3 in your hand. And so at the end of your turn, when you pass, you'll reveal all your remaining cards and gain a bonus based on the card, but it's different to the other stuff. So the cards are multi-purpose, they do multiple things, and the grafting just sort of makes that a bit more dynamic. You can sort of get these cards, the grafting cards, attached to other cards. They're from the new expansion. But Brian says he's just received the Uprising box. So for those of you that don't know, the Uprising box is the new core set. It is a standalone thing. It works with the Ix expansion. It works Immortality. It works with the second expansion, Immortality. What's the first one called? Eternity? I don't know. Anyway, it works with both of the expansions for the original core game, and also, if you want to, you can take all of the cards from the original core game and mash them into Uprising, so you have an enormous deck of random nonsense, if indeed that is the way you want to play. But I really like all 3. I'll happily play this anytime, even though I think it is a little bit of Rise of Ix and then Immortality, yeah. Even though I think it is a bit sort of random, and once you understand where the points come from, then it's largely just sort of a case of, sort of randomly chasing the other points. Good night, Heggers. Thanks for hanging out, man. I hope you got something useful out of this. Right, let's head over here. Well, I can't go over here. All right, you're just gonna have to watch me sort out photos on stream. Sorry about this, guys. Where are the rest of the photos? They are here, aren't they? Yeah, they are here. So why is that just cycling again? I don't know. It says third. All right, hold tight. So what do we get up to? Dune Imperium. All right, Planta Nubo. So this was another one that Paul brought back on Hotness, and we signed up to play it. It's Uwe Rosenberg, it's Mike Keller, it's O'Day, it's Andreas Odendahl. And you'll know Mike Keller and Andreas Odendahl from designing La Granja, and you'll know Uwe Rosenberg from all of the things he's designed, like Agricola and Feast for Odin. and great many more things. This is published by the Game Builders, and I don't know if it's out yet, but this is a 3.8. Chedicus says, I love Uwe. Chedicus, I love Uwe. I mean, he's designed so many games. It's hard to not to find an Uwe that you like. So many games, light games, heavy games, all manner of games. Planta Nubo is a heavy game. Hang on, my photos are slightly too big now. There we go. Heavy Euro game with many mechanisms. I'll see if I can find some stuff to illustrate. So this is the main game board, which is upside down because I'm great at photography. There's some cards to draft here, but that's not really what this is about. So this is going to be 3 rounds. 3 or 4 rounds of play. Hang on, let's count. The spyglass in the middle right moves between the cards, just like in Arnak. And then when it gets to the final spot, so it's 1, 2, 3. 3 rounds. When it gets to the final spot, the game ends and then it's final scoring. And this is a part of your player board. And what you can see above this are the action spaces. So in a round, a player has... Did I get a tool? Nope, there we go. We're moving on there. So you can see in the top left here a tool. It's a spanner. You've got 4 of them on your turn. You're going to place a spanner into that set of 9 tiles surrounded, 9 action tiles surrounded by tiles holding tetromino pieces. And you put your tools, as you can see, some are out there between 2 tiles. And then you get to pick one of those 2 tiles to trigger and you get some actions. Or if you pick one of the tetromino tiles, you take the tetromino and put it into this player area on your player board here, which you can see in the bottom center. Or you can one-shot once per round, trigger your special robot power, and get both actions on both tiles. This is a heavy game. It's a 3.8, but it feels more mechanical than that. There's a lot of mechanisms, and they don't necessarily intuitively coalesce. So this is quite a complex undertaking, so I'm not going to go into the full rules of it. We're very lucky to have Paul teach us this, because if he hadn't, I don't think we would have been able to learn it from the rulebook, actually. Especially not in a reasonable amount of time. But in a nutshell, what you're trying to do is basically grab the polyominoes, put them into your player board here, where they will come with cubes on them that represent flowers. And then you're going to take the flowers and you're going to fulfill contracts, which you can see along the top of this board, which is actually the bottom of the photo. You can see there's the sets of 4 boxes, and those are the colors that the flowers are going to go in. So you're completing these little contracts of boxes. And actually what you're going to get, you're not going to get anything for completing the contract, but you can see below that, which is actually above it in the photo, these little green dots. And when you trigger the green dots, then your power die, which you can see in the bottom right here, the gray die on a 1, is going to move around this circle. So that's the green power circle. It's going to go around and around and around it. And actually what you can't see in this photo is there's wires coming out of the circle, and they're going to be attached to cards, which are the cards you're going to get from this card marketplace here, which are special powers. So as the die zips around, it triggers the cards, giving you special powers. And so that's sort of what you're doing to combo actions. You're putting the flowers into the contracts to get the green energy, to trigger the green energy circle, to trigger the cards, to get the combo powers. What you're also doing is, once you've got the flower beds in your tableau, once you've managed to clear all the flowers off of the flower beds, then you can plant forests on the flower bed. So unfortunately, I don't actually have any forests in the photo. Here's some more contracts with actually a better shot of the green power symbols. So every time you put a flower down in the box, you get the green power shown underneath. You get to advance the die and power up the cards for the combo actions. But you've also got forests, which are tiles that you can only build on top of other tiles. So you want to have empty flower beds within your tableau, or your polyomino space here. So you're trying to sort of fill it in so you can build the forest, because it can only go on top of empty flower beds. And the forest is where you're going to get big endgame scoring points. You've also got some endgame scoring cards that you can draft. The blue ones on the middle center right here are endgame scoring, and there's going to be more of them as the rounds progress. There's loads more mechanisms going on in this game, but that's the fundamentals of it. It is combo-tastic, sort of action-tastic. It doesn't feel like polyomino building. Like, you don't get massive amounts of polyominoes, and you're not necessarily trying to fill in the whole thing, although I guess if you could, that'd be great. It's more about sort of getting the flowers that you can get out to get the energy to combo the actions, while simultaneously creating big areas of empty flower beds that you can build the forests in. The forests come in many sizes, and the big ones are the best ones for scoring. At 4 players, there was so much downtime, we abandoned this halfway through round 2. We didn't finish it. There was so much downtime, and we played for 2 hours, and we got halfway through the game at 4. I think that the build your own action rondel thing going on here with the cards around the green energy track is really cool. I really like it. I kind of wish the game focused on that more and less on loads of other stuff. I think this would probably be quite good solo or at 2. I don't think I'd want to play it at higher counts. The only player interaction is people drafting stuff from this market, potentially going into contracts that you want with their flowers so you can't use those spaces, and inadvertently blocking each other here on the action tiles. And that's about it. And there's so much going on, especially at 4. There's almost no deliberate blocking or deliberate taking. It's all just sort of timing. And you can't really look at other people and guess what they're trying to do or what tiles they want or what they're going to do. So it's never deliberate. It's always inadvertent. It's got some really interesting mechanisms in it, and it's got some really compelling stuff going on. But the rulebook is a complete mess. The iconography is inconsistent and bad. The theme is... the theme is robots trying to rebuild the future, I think. But if you read the actual... if you read the actual text on BGG, the description from the main page here, it doesn't fill me with a sense that the designers loved the idea of sort of rejuvenating the world or rewilding nature or anything like that. It just kind of feels a bit, I don't know, a bit like maybe they went with that because that's what's hot right now. Yeah, it looks pretty tacked on. It felt pretty tacked on. It could have been a number of different things. I mean, why are we putting the flowers into crates? We'll never know. Why are we planting the flowers and picking them and putting them to crates? Why can the trees only be built on empty flower beds instead of full flower beds in bloom? Again, we'll never know. It doesn't matter because it's not important to the mechanisms or justifying in the theme. So, and also the robots seem to be really important, but there are people. If you can see actually these 4 upside down tile houses here across the middle between the 2 decks of cards, they actually have people in them. Ryan says, I love digesting and working through complicated rules. Made me feel clever, I suppose. No more. Uwe games are gone from my collection. Same with the Lacerda titles. Juice got to be worth the squeeze. Brian, I do agree with you. But I do think there is sort of a pleasure in system mastery when it feels like it rewards you for it, you know? And I gotta say, like, it's a fine line between sort of complex systems that are satisfying to master and complex systems that feel bloated or not worth mastering. And I think this one actually sits right in the middle. I think that there will be people who are into games who really enjoy something about this, and I think it's largely going to be that weird green action wheel. This thing is really compelling, and being able to draft the cards and build it up and trigger it and go wee around it and gain things, it's really good. But I think that there's too much else going on, and furthermore, it wants to be played at 2, and at 2 it's competing with an enormous number of in my opinion much more compelling 2-player games. Brian says, I have GMT's Skies Above Britain for that. Yeah, and I've got High Frontier. So, you know, or John Company. Yeah, well, I mean, John Company is great, but John Company is great at 5. Anyway, moving on. That's Planta Nubo. We didn't finish it. I'm not particularly inclined to go back to it. I'd wait for a new edition before trying it again anyway, because the rulebook is diabolical and the iconography is bad. But we'll see. We'll see if it gets another edition, because people have to play it and want one. But for what it's worth, the people who were really into crunchy mechanical Euros and system mastery, like Paul, really like it. So if that's your thing, this could be a good one for you. All right, Age of Innovation, a Terra Mystica game. You all know how to play Terra Mystica? This is the new Terra Mystica. We'll save that, I think, Brian, for another time, because I've got to keep this show moving. It's a big topic. But yeah, so right, Terra Mystica. You all know Terra Mystica. You all know Gaia Project. So this is Terra Mystica 2.0, I guess. I don't think it's a good way to describe it. What they've done is they've taken Terra Mystica, they've made some fundamental changes to it. This is Age of Innovation, right? The two, I mean, there's a lot of sort of subtle changes, and really what they've done is they've said, okay, people have played a lot of Terra Mystica, so we're going to put in a lot more sort of randomized setup, not the board. The board is still fixed, as you can see here. The board is printed, it's not modular, but what they have done is made modular races. So previously, the races were tied into the colors. So if you're yellow, you're the fakirs or the Jinn, was it? If you're blue, you're the fish people or the mer people, and so on. If you're green, you're the elves or the tree folk. But if you're in this one, you can be brown, which is the farmer people, and then you can be any of the factions, because the faction tile and the color are distinct, and there are powers that are tied into both. So you'll get this combo of powers that is much more random than you would in normal Terra Mystica. They've also, and I'm going to have to explain this a bit like how to play Terra Mystica. I think, to preempt the question, this is for people who've played Terra Mystica loads and want something that's a little bit different, a little bit more dynamic during setup. But if you've not, I don't think this is a replacement for Terra Mystica. It's more complex. Understanding the power dynamics requires a better understanding of the game. Terra Mystica also has a gradual complexity scaling as you get the expansions involved, whereas this is just one thing and it's right in the deep end. I also don't think this is as complex as Gaia Project, so I don't know where it fits. If you've got Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, I don't know if you really need this. In fact, you definitely don't. But if you've got Terra Mystica and Gaia Project and you're like, I'm never going to play Terra Mystica again because we've played it 150 times, then, this is going to get you that Terra Mystica itch, scratch that Terra Mystica itch, but you could just play Gaia Project, unless you've also played that 150 times, and then you're ready for Age of Innovation. I've got Terra Mystica and I love it. I've got Gaia Project and I love it. I'm not going to buy Age of Innovation. I've not played them enough. I just haven't. if I played them more, I'd happily play Age of Innovation anytime someone brought it out and recommended it. The only reason we were able to play it at the con, though, is because we'd all already played Terra Mystica. Like, it's a big teach, you know. So is Gaia Project, but, you know, if someone's like, I've never played any of them, you're still going to show them Terra Mystica base game, I think. You know, unless they're really into the hobby and they're really into heavy games, and then you might just start them out in Gaia Project. And then they'll come to this and they'll be like, oh, it's like Gaia Project with, like, you know, but sort of different. Yeah, so races and color factions, much more modular or random sort of combinations going on here. You can also actually see, for those of you that know, the main building. I can't remember what they're called in the other two. In this, they're called palaces, but they are there's typically a powerful power associated with these. Here you can see I'm getting a priest, and I've got a flying ability, not unlike the fakirs from my palace, which is the middle left of the photo. That's draftable. So when you build your palace, you get to choose a tile from a marketplace. So there's an element of sort of first come, first served. Grab the power, you know. That is really interesting. I thought that was really cool. I really liked that, how that you could, you know, sort of, there was pressure to decide whether or not you're going to beeline for the palace. Very often in Terra Mystica, if people don't know what to do at all, you say, well, build your palace as quickly as possible, because your power is usually really fundamental to your faction strategy. Now it's like, is it? You know, is there one of those tiles that you think is incredible? But again, you have to be able to read the board state and understand the combo of the color and race you've been given to understand what's the best tile to get in there. So it requires a bit more familiarity with the game. Board, it's the same board as Terra Mystica. I mean, it might not be the exact same layout. I don't think it is, but, you know, it's functionally the exact same thing. This is the new thing. This is the... So, these tiles at the bottom are your... the tiles that you get from building your temples and things in Terra Mystica, if you know that. They're asymmetrical player powers that you get for building those things. But where in Terra Mystica, they just move you up the temple tracks, which we can see over here. The temple tracks, which are slightly different. We can look at that in a minute, but in Terra Mystica, they move you up there. In Gaia Project, they also just move you up those tracks. In this, they move you up the tracks, or they give you books. And books is a new currency that's not in Gaia Project or Terra Mystica, and books allow you to buy innovations, which are the tiles at the top of the board. And those are just powerful asymmetrical player powers. Some of them give you special abilities, unique actions, passive abilities, or big points bonanzas. Some of them are just scoring. And some of them let you put out these white buildings, which are neutral buildings, which come with special benefits as well. So there's now neutral buildings that you can get. But when you build them on your color, because you bought those tiles, they become your building. So that's the sort of the main new part of innovations, are these innovations tiles and the book currency. There's also, if we have a quick look at the board, for those of you that know Terra Mystica, there's the special magic power actions at the bottom of the player board that are contentious. Whoever's got the power can take those actions, but the minute they take it for the round, it's unavailable to everyone else. So there's sort of a race to spend your power to get those. And now there's 3 more that you can acquire by spending the books. So if you don't spend the books on the innovations, you can use them there instead. And then we've got the tracks, which are basically the same, except that the key, you need the key to get up the track, and the gate that the key opens is lower. That's going to mean nothing to anyone unless you know Gaia Project and Terra Mystica. So the key is lower, and actually if you bypass the key, the gate with the key, the gate's lower, and if you bypass it, there's some income up there if you beeline up one of those tracks. And I think I've pretty much summarized my thoughts on Age of Innovation. I would quite like to own it. I can't justify buying it. And I'd happily play it any time because I really like Terra Mystica and Gaia Project. but I wouldn't, if someone was completely unfamiliar with the games, I wouldn't start them out on it. And it's published by Capstone Games. It came out this year, I think. Ooh, Among Cultists. So I got a review copy of Among Cultists, but this wasn't actually mine. Someone else brought it and wanted to play it and wanted me to teach it because it's quite fiddly to set up. I played it 4 times now. I played it at Essen 3 times, and I played it once at GRiDCon. At Essen, I played it twice with the same group at 4. And when you play it at 4 or 6, you have to use an AI. And when you play it at 5, 7, or 8, it's just people. This is a social deduction game. It's actually, if you know the video game Among Us, this is Among Us, but a board game. It's designed by Stefan Godot and published by Godot Games via Kickstarter. And they also did a game called Human Punishment, which I haven't played. In Among Cultists, you are a group of investigators who've shown up at a university where there is a ritual taking place, but one of you is not what they seem. You have to run around the university looking for clues, gathering evidence. You have to get all the clues before the time runs out. Not all the clues, but you have to amass an amount of clues before the time runs out, while one of you is trying to kill everyone else. And so it is a hidden role social deduction game. And the box art gives us serious young adult modern fantasy novel vibes. Yeah, it does, actually. I mean, the art, the actual character art and stuff is really nice. I don't seem to have my proper table camera. Here it is. I did get out the Among Cultists box because I don't actually have any photos of it from the convention, because by the time we got around to playing it and setting it up, I was tired. But the map is made up of these big tiles, and everyone gets a satisfying chunky wooden piece. Oh, this is the tile with the victory points on it. You put out 6 of these tiles, so it takes up quite a lot of board space. But you've got these tiles, and they're rooms connected by corridors, and you're going to be moving your big pieces around the corridors. And you've got within each room these sort of clues here, and ideally the investigators are going to meet up in this room and gather the clues and put them over here. And when they collect all the clues from a room, they get the points shown here, so they go up this points track. And when they get to a certain number, they've won the game. So this is this game's equivalent of doing your tasks in Among Us, being a good task person. And the investigators will have hands of cards that are made up of different kinds of cards, and then the cultist or cultists will have a unique set of cards that allows them to do more things like murder people. And so functionally the idea of doing tasks and collecting clues is not really, it provides a structure for the social deduction part of the game to manifest, right? Because really, it's highly unlikely that if you just focus on the tasks, you're going to be able to get them all done before the cultist kills people, right? And the way life works in this game is really, really clever, because you've got what's called a pulse deck made up of pulse cards. And these are either dead or alive cards. And everyone starts with 1 card in their pulse deck. He's looking for a card. So they look like this on the back. And everyone starts with 1 in their deck. And they're either these nice green I'm alive cards, or there's a red one that says you're dead. And all the investigators get 1 at random at the start, and there might be a dead investigator, there might not. So maybe someone started dead, maybe they didn't. It's unknown. There's a good chance they did, but maybe they didn't. But whenever you bump into somebody, so whenever you go into a room with someone else, then you have to take the pulse cards that are in your hand and exchange 1 each. And if you're an investigator, you only have alive cards in your hand, so you're just giving out alive cards because you don't want to kill anyone. But if you're the cultist, you have both alive and dead cards in your hand, and you can choose whether or not to kill someone. But it goes face down into their pulse deck, and then they don't know that they're dead until someone comes and checks their pulse. And if you want to check someone's pulse, you have to be in the room with them. So when you check their pulse, you can take all of their pulse deck, you give it a shuffle, and then you look at it, and if there's a dead card in there, they're announced dead. So you can be sort of like a dead man walking, Schrodinger's player, both alive and dead simultaneously, only revealed to be dead when somebody actually checks your pulse. And furthermore, if that person is the cultist, they can check your deck, and then if they see that you're dead, they can lie and say, no, you're not dead. Only the cultist can do that, but there'd be no reason for the investigators to lie anyway. And of course, you'll never really know if the cultist was lying for sure, because the next time someone comes to check your pulse to verify whether the original person was lying, first you have to bump into each other and exchange cards. It's a really interesting mechanism, and there's a lot of really interesting elements going on in this game. I mean, well, functionally it's very, very simple, right? It's just run around the rooms, collect the clues. You have to create an exploration deck. So before you can collect the clues, you have to explore the room. And again, everyone's got a hand of cards. The cultists have nice explore cards. The investigators have nice explore cards they're putting into the rooms. And when those cards are revealed, you get a clue. But the cultist has nasty sabotage cards that they're going to put into the rooms. And when those are revealed, the clues are lost. So, it's a bit of a setback. And there's some other nice mechanisms going on as well. But as a sort of a basic framework for social deduction, I feel like it's a really solid framework. Social deduction takes place as a sort of a meta level, right? We all understand what we're supposed to be doing, but one of us is not really doing it, or only sort of pretending to do it in part. The other thing that's going on here, actually, these path cards. Everyone's got one, and the path cards show matching rooms that are on the board. And if you want to do room actions, which involve gathering clues and stuff, you can only access specific rooms during specific rounds. So in round 1, this player can go to any one of these 3 rooms. In round 2, it has to be one of these 2. And then you sort of move down these columns here. So when you get to round 5, you're back to these 3 again. So you're constantly on the move between rooms trying to do the actions. And everyone's got sort of a specific path that they have to follow. And this means that there's going to be times when they can't avoid each other. Because fundamentally, as an investigator, what you want is to just scatter. And then, so it's kind of the opposite of Among Us in that way. In Among Us, you want to stick together so that somebody can see if you've been killed, because it's just very obvious if you see someone dying. But, that's also got fog of war and stuff, which doesn't exist in this game. So in this game, they sort of model this by having these path cards where people might have to bump into each other because you've got to move around the board. You might, whenever you pass through someone, there's a chance for murdering to happen. You might only be able to access the same rooms. The cultist also has a path card, but they can just choose to ignore it if they want. So as I was saying, the sort of the framework for the gameplay and the meta game of the social deduction that comes out of this, I think, is really compelling. I've really enjoyed all 4 plays that I've had of this game, but I've got 2 observations. One is that in both games where an investigator started dead, the cultists won, or the cultist won. And in both games where none of the investigators started dead, the investigators won. So that's a bit of a problem. But I don't think that it's imbalanced. What I think is that with a group that's new to the game, it seems like the game is largely swung in the favor of one side or the other based on that initial setup. So I think, and because this is sort of a meta game that exists above the sort of the basic framework of the game, and that's what the social deduction is, right? You're playing the game, but you're not. That's not the real game. The real game is who's lying. And I think that that's really good, that part. I just don't think that I've been able to play this enough with the same group to really access that part of the game properly. And so I think you want to play this multiple times with the same group. I think you could probably get a game of this couple games of this back to back, but it is like a 90-minute game. It's not the Resistance Avalon. You don't do 15 minutes to 30 minutes and have a good laugh and then it's all over. This is like a 90-minute game. It could be as short as an hour if it's over real quick, if people sort of get lucky or make a good guess. But it's probably going to be 90 minutes. The other thing is that it's a lot of faff to set up. It's very particular about the setup, and if you get the setup wrong, you can just ruin the whole game. So you've got to be very on the ball about making sure you set it up correctly. And actually, at Essen we were fine, but at GRiDCon we'd been drinking and we messed up the setup like 3 times and had to start over 3 times. But I'm really keen to try more of this. I really want to get it to the table with the same group or with some people that have already played it. There's also I think for like really hardcore gamers, I think the sort of the basic starting setup is going to be faff is a great word. I think the basic starting setup might be, I don't know about too easy, but it might be too hard for the cultist. Again, like, you know, as I said, we've seen the cultist win every game where someone started dead. So that's obviously the main thing. But I think it can be very difficult and intimidating for the cultist because you do have to be a good liar for a long time, right? It's like a 90-minute game, so you have to keep hidden and stay subtle and sow discord in subtle mechanical ways as well as, you know, verbal human ways for an extended period of time. And so there are some recommended sort of if you're a social deduction expert setup at the back of the rulebook, and this is quite nice actually. What they've got going on here are all these different roles. So like in all the games I've played, we've just used 3 or 4 banal investigators with no special abilities and a full-on normal cultist. Again, no special ability, but capable of doing everything. But you've got all these other investigator types, and you've got all these other cultist types that have sort of varying limitations and things. So you can really sort of tweak it and balance it around these roles if you want to make the game sort of different or sort of easier or harder for the good guys or the bad guys. So I think that's good. I definitely would like to explore that a bit more as well. But like I said, I also think this one really wants to be 5, 7, or 8 players. Now, having said that, when we played it 4 with the AI, that was really interesting because the AI was just doing its own thing. And furthermore, the AI could be the cultist, which was really interesting because there was this like sort of ongoing dilemma that maybe all 4 humans were just investigators. And I really liked that, but I do think it changes the dynamic of the game quite a lot. So I think if you want the sort of the purest form of the game, you play with 5, 7, or 8. But if you are interested in exploring this sort of oddity where there's a sort of a very generic AI walking around and you've got to work out whether or not they're a baddie, you could also give that a try. So yeah, that's Among Cultists. I really want to play it more. Hard to say for sure anything more solid about it at the moment because like I said, I think even after 4 plays with 3 different groups, we haven't quite achieved the sort of the level of familiarity we need to really get our hooks into it. Guards of Atlantis II. I've only got one terrible photo of this. Um, and it's not even here. Apparently I can only upload 12 photos to the OBS slideshow. I think this is just a limit of OBS. I love Guards of Atlantis too. This is a very specific thing. It is a game that ideally wants to... It's a team game. It's based on a MOBA, but it's highly abstracted. I'm going to see if I can get my photo into the slideshow here. My one photo, which is not even any good. Yeah, there's... Okay, so these are all not working, these photos. Oh, can I just delete the ones we've already looked at, and then it will load up the rest? Yep, the answer is yes. Um, also, hang on, the cat is here. Hello, do you want to come in? Inside quickly. Thank you. If you hear bells, that's the cat. Okay, so Guards of Atlantis 2. You can't really see much from this photo. I'm sorry, but it is. I didn't get another one, did I? Nope, that's the next game, and there's no box art for it apparently. Logan, it is still at the risk of being a horrible enabler. Late pledges are available. Bon Bon wants a cat treat. Precious cat treats. My precious. So Guards of Atlantis 2. It's a highly abstracted MOBA. So it's sort of lane-based combat, right? Like two factions running at each other on a map. They're gonna collide in the middle. Oh, my due diligence. Hang on. But they're gonna collide in the middle. You are heroes, special, powerful heroes, and you are trying to support your faction of mooks, which are automated, fighting other automated mooks, so that your mooks win. There are heroes on the opposite team who are trying to do the same thing, right? Guards of Atlantis 2 is designed by Artyom Nichipurov and published by Wolf Designer, which is his company. His games are pretty much only ever available through crowdfunding, and I believe you can still late pledge to the reprint of this. It is very particular. Guards of Atlantis 2 ideally wants to be played in either 2v2 or 3v3. It can be played at 4v4 or 5v5 or at odd numbers, but those are not the sort of probably the best way to play. We played 2v2 at GRiDCon, and it is also a game of sort of have you come to cause chaos and anarchy? No, she wants to look out the window. There you go. Anyway, right. So, the way the game functions is that everyone gets a hero. The hero has a deck of cards. These are special powers. You've got a hand of 5 cards. All of those cards are your fundamental powers. And over the course of the game, as you kill enemy mooks and potentially kill enemy heroes, you will accrue money, which will allow you to level up, and then you will acquire better versions of the cards that are in your hand. The game is really about pushing into the enemy base. So every time the mooks combat resolves, if all the enemy mooks are dead, then the combat sort of resets closer to the enemy base. So you want the combat to keep resolving in your favor so that it moves closer to the enemy base. Eventually it moves in, at which point you've won the game. However, if the combat goes back and forth enough, then after a certain amount of combats have been resolved, whoever wins the next combat wins. That's another way it ends, and whoever wins that combat wins. And then the last way is actually, there's also, each team has a certain number of lives. Every time one of their heroes dies, they lose lives. If it's a very high level hero, they'll lose more lives. So if those lives are exhausted, then they lose and you win the game. And on your turn, you're going to play out the cards from your hand into your player board. So every round is 4 turns. You've got a hand of 5 cards, 4 turns. That means you're playing 4 of your 5 cards every round. And you play them onto the sort of the space for the current turn. And once everyone's played their cards there, you all flip them face up. They've got an initiative value on them. Players act in initiative order, carrying out the actions on their cards, which are going to be like attacks. Typically, they could be spells or special powers. They might just be moving around, but you get 1 action off the card. The card can typically do 1 primary action, which is sort of like a good attack or a good ability or a good move, or it can do a secondary function, which is often like a bad attack or a bad move or a less exciting thing. Once everyone's resolved their cards, then you play the next card, and so on until everyone's played 4. Well, maybe not everyone gets to play 4, but until the 4th sort of turn is resolved, that's the end of the round. Then everyone gets a chance to level up. The mooks will fight each other and repeat until the game ends. Where it gets interesting is that the cards are also discarded from your hand as defense, so you don't have hit points or anything like that. But when you're hit by another player, you have to discard a card from your hand that can defend. Some cards are sort of skill defense, so they're like, automatically block this attack, right? And if you know someone's got that, it means you're definitely going to have to hit them twice in order to kill them. But some cards are just a numerical value, so you might hit them with a strength 8 attack, and they must discard, higher than that, or they're dead, right? Because if you ever can't defend against an attack, you just die. And actually, dying is not the end of the world. I mean, you get to come back into the game real quick and play again really fast, but it's not great because it gives your opponents a lot of money to level up with, and also it uses up your team's lives. Yeah, you done? You want to go back out? Okay. You don't want to come sit with me? No? You want to go out? Here you go. Come on then. So, I really like that sort of like vicious fragility of the heroes that feels like they can die at any moment. I like that if you hit someone a bunch, even if you don't kill them, they have to discard a bunch of cards to stay alive, and then they actually get less actions in the round. Because the first card you discard could be your excess card, but that means in round 4, if you play an action, you actually have no card for defense, and you're very vulnerable. That tension is excellent. But what is really cool are the communication restrictions. And I think... at the risk of talking about, at the risk of sort of, the thing is, everything in this game is super explicit. Like, it's a highly competitive game. It's super, super competitive. And it's also a team game that's highly reliant on collaborative play. So in order to sort of simulate the, what they call in the game, the sort of the confusion of war, this is also the sort of derived from the video games that have inspired this, where, you don't have perfect information. There are communication restrictions. But what's great about them, and also this is sort of mirrored in all the card text as well, is just how explicit the game is. Like, there's rarely any confusion, You're almost never going onto BGG and looking up how stuff works, because it's just really clear and really explicit and really well configured. And it just feels finely crafted. And that's partly because it's a second edition, and that's partly also because Artyom Nichipurov is just really good at that. So every round is 2 phases, right? Every turn. Every round is 4 turns, and every turn is 2 phases. The first phase is everyone picks a card. The second phase is everyone flips over their card and then resolves them in initiative order. And during that first phase, you can talk to your teammate as much as you want about your strategy. You can be like, I'm going to kill Dave. Let's all go kill Dave. But you must do it openly. So all communication is open. Explicitly, you are not allowed to show your teammate any of the cards in your hand, but you can read them to your teammate. And the point of this is to make sure that information is being publicly communicated, so everything you're saying to your teammate, the other team can hear, right? So they can hear your plan, and if they can do something about it, maybe they should. And if they can't, well, then they should have tried better, So if you want to get them by surprise, you can't communicate with your teammate. You just kind of have to rely on them to know what to do. And it's such an exciting and interesting dynamic. And then when you get to the second phase, which is the cards are being revealed, on your turn, you cannot strategize with your opponent. With your teammate, you're just not allowed to. If they have to make a decision, then they cannot explain their rationale. I'll give you an example. If you both tie for initiative on the same team, you can say, I really want to go first, or I don't care about going first. but you cannot explain your rationale. So you cannot say, I really want to go first because I need to dodge that attack, or I really want to go first so that I can debuff them when you attack. You can look at everyone's cards, so you can constantly ask to look at cards, and maybe you'll get on the same wavelength if you see what your teammate is doing, but you cannot explain your rationale. You're not allowed. So you can just express intensity of desire, and it's so explicit. It's just really great. It is a game that is really, really skill based. It does some nice things to sort of mitigate skill differentials. So there's handicap cards in there you can use if someone's really good. All of the heroes have a massive scale of complexity. So some of them are dead simple. Some of them are a lot more complicated. I don't know how many are actually in the core game because I went all in and it just came in one giant box. But there's like 20 something odd heroes in the box I've got. I think there's possibly 12 or 16 in the core game, maybe 12. But I just think that you can play this. If you have the right group for this, you could just play this so much and get so much out of it and so much replayability. But getting 4 to 6 people to sort of commit to playing this, I mean, and it doesn't take long. Like, the game is 90 minutes at best, and I think what you really want to do is set aside sort of an afternoon to do like 2 or 3 or 4 games, and maybe change up the teams and you change up the heroes, and you just sort of get into it as a group, but you do need a group to commit to playing it. And I haven't really actually managed to find that myself. Like, I still have only played this a few times with the same group, and occasionally, and I keep bringing it to the table with like new groups. Like at GRiDCon, I played it with all new people who'd never seen it before. But one of them was like, I have the perfect group from this, and went away and went all in on the late pledge. So, I think if you've got the right group for this is going to be a really rewarding experience. And it's just a really sort of solid, well-balanced, rules explicit game. I really I am, despite the fact that I really struggle to get it to the table, I'm really glad I have it. And even though I'm terrible at it and I haven't actually won it, I'm happy to play it anytime. So that's Guards of Atlantis 2. All right, the next one should have art here, but it doesn't. I don't know if we find it late. There it is. So this is Murano. This is an older Euro that was brought to the table by one of the group who bought it. I think this is like 2014, this one. This was the all-in collector or sort of big box edition of Murano. This is designed by Marcus and Inca Brand, who you will know as the designers of Village, My Village, and the excellent Rajas of the Ganges. They also designed all of the Exit games. Murano is published by someone. So the one we played is actually Murano the Complete Edition, which is here, and this is published by Lookout Games with art by Clemens Franz, which you can definitely tell. So this is from, well, this edition was published in 2020. But the original Murano is much earlier, 2014. And in Murano, you are glass blowers in Venice, I think. And there's gondolas everywhere. Logan says, don't say, even though I don't play it regularly play it, I'm glad to have it. That describes my whole collection. Yeah, I mean, I think that guards, I mean, I could apply that to a lot in my collection as well, Logan, but I think that guards really stands out as something that is special. That I don't have anything else like it in my collection. And I have an enormous collection. I've not played much else like it. Other MOBA games are just, they don't even come close. And it's not even really a MOBA game. It's a sort of a unique and weird and interesting thing. I mean, I think that Artyom is a great designer. I really like all three of his games. The others being Warpgate and Trickshot, but Guards I think it's really special. So in in Murano, this is a Euro game. We're trying to amass the most points by the end of the game. The board is these islands that are connected by bridges, and on the islands are all these dark spaces, and they all start empty. And you've got all these tiles here, and you're going to be purchasing the tiles and putting them out on the islands. And the tiles come in two types, buildings and streets, and you'll be building streets and building buildings, and you can get various benefits from this. Let me see if I have a photo. Nope, I've only got the tree and this terrible... There should be another photo, actually, showing the track around the outside. So what you can see... So you can see a tiny stack of buildings in the sort of the upper left there. The white, red, and green and yellow buildings. There was also two piles of streets, but they're all gone. They've all been placed on the board, and when two piles are empty, either both of the street piles or a pile of buildings and a pile of streets or two building piles, when two piles are empty, the game is over, and we proceed to final scoring. And the main way you're actually going to get points in this game are from the Murano cards, which are on the far right. So you can see the red deck, which are passive asymmetrical player powers that you'll get during the game, and then next to that are the gondoliers, the special characters. You'll also pick up these cards during the game, but they're secret endgame scoring conditions. So you'll pick up these cards, and then they'll give you a scoring condition, and then you must try to manifest it. And that's where a lot of your endgame points will come from. You'll also get quite a lot of points during the game, primarily from building the buildings, which give you points. Except for the building that lets you get the asymmetrical player powers. That doesn't give you points, it gives you power. But some of the powers are just to get points. Anyway, we've got this really interesting gondolier mechanism for the actions. You can't see it very clearly on this board, on this photo, but you can see around the outside of the board are these, there's one red meeple, gondolier meeple, and two black gondolier meeples. And functionally, what you do is you move them around the board, and the space they land on, you get to take the action. They can't pass each other, though, because the gondoliers are too fat. So when if you want to take an action that someone else is sitting on, you actually have to pay to move the gondolier on the action, and then you can move a different gondolier up behind it to take the action. You can move multiple gondoliers, but you have to pay more and more money every time. Money is the main resource in the game. It's the only resource in the game. It's hard to come by. And most action spaces appear twice on that river track, but a few only appear once. So you must make sure that you can get into those crucial action spaces when you need to. Each island also has a space for your own personal private gondoliers, which take the forms of little wooden pawns in your player color. And those little wooden pawns are actually linked to the final scoring characters in your hand. So without putting out those gondoliers, you cannot score your cards, and your cards will give you conditions for the islands. So you send your private gondoliers to the specific islands, and then you can score the criteria that's hidden in your hand on that island. So you want to sort of wait in order to send your gondolier to the right island so you can maximize your score. But at the same time, there's 4 spaces at each island, and if they all go, they're all gone. They are in each player's color, but that just means you can access the one in your color at a discount, but you can buy into any space at a higher price. So someone could potentially buy up all 4 spaces on a single island, and then no one could go there to score. This game moves really fast. Like, it's really like boom, 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 turn, 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 turn. It's super quick, and it's a very pleasant Euro. I've really no complaints about this. There's some nice player interaction in the way the buildings and the streets manifest on the islands. There is some nice tension around getting the private cards, getting the scoring cards. Of course, the scoring cards aren't really helpful if you don't have the gondoliers on the islands, so you have to get those too. Building up a way to get money is really critical, and there's really just 2 ways to do it. Either you build shops on the islands, and then you will make money from the shops based on the citizens. So you can see actually in the bottom center of this photo, a street that has loads of citizens. That's because we were all dumping the citizens on that island because we didn't want to put them next to our opponent's shops, because the citizens will combo with the shops to make money. That's one of the ways to make income. And you can see on the island in the middle left there are far fewer citizens because my buddy had all his shops there and we didn't want to give him any citizens so he couldn't make any money. The other way you'll make money is actually through glass blowing. This whole game is about glass blowing. And the way this kind of works is the green buildings are glass factories. And so you take this glass blowing action, which only appears once on the river track, so it's quite hard to get to. So you don't get to do it all the time. And then that's kind of a gamble, actually. When you take the glass blowing action, you can trigger up to as many factories as you have built. But for every factory you turn on, you lose 2 victory points, which is potentially really big. And then you get to go into this bag and pull out these beads, which are the colored gems you see in all kinds of games, which represent the glassware that you've created. And you pull out a number of beads equal to the number of factories you turned on. So you turn on 3 factories, you pay 6 victory points, ouch, and then you get 3 beads. And then you can trade the glass beads in after that for money. 1 bead is worth like 5 coins, and if you get 3 matching beads, so they have to make sets, if you get 3 matching beads, you get 20 coins, which is a huge bonanza. So that's a sort of a gambling thing. And then if you play with the Christmas tree promo, which I forced them to play with because I said, because it says on the box, on the complete edition, it says, includes the Christmas tree promo. And I was like, you better believe we're playing with the Christmas tree promo. This includes it. And if we don't, what are we really gamers? And so you can actually put the little glass beads or some money that you've just made onto the tree, and then you get some more points. And that's how the Christmas tree promo works. Anyway, it's a nice game. I'm not going to rush out and buy it, but I was certainly happy to play it. I was really pleased with how fast it moved and how little downtime there was. We played it at 3. And yeah, exactly, as if someone would suggest we don't play with the Christmas tree. Come on now. But yeah, really pleasant game. I'd happily play this anytime anyone suggested it. Probably takes, at 3 players, 60 to 90 minutes tops. Like, it's not long. You could probably do it much quicker if you really know what's going on in the game, but we didn't. We just learned it. But yeah, nice game. And I like how fast the turns are. Alright, Last Light. You all heard of this one? It's a 4X game, Space 4X, that plays in 60 minutes. That's the big pitch. This is a super light 4X game that is massively overproduced. This was a huge Kickstarter from Grey Fox Games. And just like Grey Fox Games' track record, the production on this is all over the shop. Like, it's just crazily inconsistent. Like, they've got these incredible glass marbles to be the planets. They have absolutely no function in the game. In fact, you can see on the base there that every planet has a color, and as far as I can tell, the color is borderline irrelevant. At the beginning of the game, everybody gets a secret card that is going to... So, just to preface this, a few things before I get into the nitty-gritty here. Last Light, it's Space 4X, as I said. This is designed by Roy Canaday. This is his first game. Roy works over on the Dice Tower channel. This is published by Grey Fox Games via crowdfunding. It was incredibly expensive. I think there was a less expensive edition. I don't know how it looks or what is included in the less expensive edition. It says playtime 45 to 75 minutes. That's pretty bang on. It is very short and very light, or relatively light. You've got a bunch of artists credited here. Jose David Lanza Cebrian, Clark Miller, and Christian Strain. And yeah, so what you're trying to do in this basically is you are a bunch of alien races, asymmetrical alien races. Well, you have one asymmetrical player power that you draft at the beginning from 2 cards that you're given. choose it from 2 cards that you're given. And then this white marble in the center of the photo is the dying star. You've all warped into this part of space, and you must absorb the light of the dying star before it goes supernova. So this is a race to 20 light points. Whoever gets to 20 light points first wins, and you're going to get light by being close to the star or by controlling the planets that are close to the star. And you can see that the board is made up of spaces on discs, and those discs are going to rotate. So there's kind of a fun system where the discs turn around, and so your spaceships are sort of drifting clockwise through space. Why it's clockwise, I don't know, man. Orbits, right? And there is a hand of cards. Every player has a hand of cards, and on your turn you all play 1 card face down, then you all flip it face up. And the actions in the game, they're all sort of variants of 4xy actions. So you've got I'm just gonna see if I have another photo of this. It's just another close-up of this. Yeah, so they're all variants of 4x actions. So you've got your you've got one called Construct, where you're going to build ships, and also you're going to build extractors. I don't know if you can see it, but on the base of the blue planet, on the left side of the photo here, there is a tiny little extractor, a tiny little blue miniature that shows that I've built an extractor on that planet, and I'm in control of it, because I'm the blue player. The yellow player, though, has moved in and killed my entire fleet and occupies that space, but they haven't actually blown up my extractor yet, so I'm still in control of that planet, technically. So that's a tiny little miniature there. So construct, build ships, build an extractor. You've got another action called research, which allows you to gain technologies. There are 3 kinds of technologies. One kind upgrades your ship in a sort of a fundamental way. Other kinds are modules. They're less good versions of ship upgrades, but you can put more of them on the ship. So the ships can become quite asymmetrical. Every faction has 3 different ship types, small, medium, and big. The big ones are inherently better than the small ones and the medium ones. But, you know, the main thing is that they have capacity for more upgrades as well, so they can become increasingly asymmetrical. But you probably, and then the third type of technology is just generic passive technologies, sort of player powers that you can build up over the course of the game. You can go heavy into technology if you want, or you don't have to. The next card is Mine, where you'll just trigger resource generation from all of the planets you control. There are 3 kinds of resources in the game: common, uncommon, and rare. And that's it. Just 3 kinds of resources that are increasingly hard to find. And then you can spend them on increasingly valuable things. The big ship, for example, costs 1 rare resource, and the little ships cost 1 common resource. There is also a finite number of models, so you can't build more little ships than you have. You're component limited by the ships. So mine the resources that you've got. Then you've got a trade card, which allows you to trade resources for other resources. That's the main way you're going to get the rare resource. It's actually very hard to find. I don't think any of the planets produce it, but I'm not sure. But the main way to do it is to take 2 uncommon resources and trade them for 1 rare resource using the trade card. Because the trade card is an abstraction of trade, when you trigger it, you get to do 2 of the cool trades on the card, but then you must give 1 common resource to another player. But it comes from the supply, so you can still do it even if you don't have one. There is, so that's research, trade, mine, extract. There are, I think, just 2 more cards. The most important card, and they're the 2 most important cards. The first is command. This is how you're going to do combat and also move. When you do command, you get to move all of your ships 1 space by default, but you could have upgraded the engines, which let them move more spaces. And also that's fight. And what's interesting about that is when you play command, everybody moves, or you move all your ships, and then they all attack. But your opponent doesn't get to attack you unless they also played a command card. So if they didn't play a command card, you just shoot at them, and then they just die, and that's it. And then there's the refresh card, which is how you're going to pick all these cards back up. And when you play a refresh card, kind of 2 things happens, right? It refreshes all of your cards that exhaust, so all your powers that tap, they get all refreshed. And then all of the cards you played to the table, you pick them all back up. And if you're on planets near the center of the board, you get an income of light. And that is, of course, incredibly important because this is a race to 20 light. Whoever gets to 20 light first is the winner. And all of these cards, all of them can be resolved simultaneously. So there's borderline no downtime. It's super fast, with the exception of command. So on a turn, everyone plays one face down, then everyone flips it face up, and then everyone goes, did anyone play command? And if everyone's like, no, I haven't played command, then you just all do your actions, and then you're like back to playing cards. Back to picking a card again, you know? But if someone played command, then everybody gets to do their stuff, because command is always resolved last. Everybody gets to do their stuff, and then you resolve command, and then everyone's back to playing a card. So it's super, super fast to parse. And then the refresh card is kind of interesting, because once you've played it to pick everything back up, you haven't got it anymore. You've played it, and now it's on the table. You get your refresh card back when everybody's played their refresh card. So the minute all three refresh cards are on the table, then this at the end of that sort of turn, once whoever played the last refresh card, or if two players played it at the same time, once they've sort of resolved it by getting their light and their cards back, then it triggers the movement of the board. So all those discs in the middle, they're going to rotate, and a few other little things are going to happen. But and then everybody gets to pick their refresh card back up. Note that they don't get to pick up the other cards they played. If there's some asymmetry about when refresh is triggering, they just get to pick their refresh card back up. And combat is resolved with dice. So you just get into a combat, you throw a bunch of dice, you'll do some damage to some enemy ships, and that's basically the whole game. Like, there are, of course, the 4X elements. There's extermination in the ship combat. There's exploration, which you do by... There's exploration tokens in the empty spaces on the board, and there's exploration tokens on every planet. And the exploration tokens on the planet reveal both some exploration bonus, just like the tokens in the empty space, as well as what resources the planet produces. So they're going to tell you whether it's a planet that produces common, uncommon, or rare resource, or light. The planet might actually just produce light. I never saw one that produces rare resource. In our game, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because there's way more planetary exploration tokens than there are planets. We played this at 3, by the way. But it goes up to 4 unless you have the expansion, then it goes up to 6. And then there is the exploit, which is building the extractors and getting the resources by playing the mining card. And then there is expand, which you're going to get by building the extractors. And building more ships and moving them around. What you want is to get them into that middle space by the white star, where you can see I've got a little fighter, because every time the refresh happens, if you're inside... No, it's when you play your refresh card. Yeah, when you play a refresh card, you're going to get points for those planets you're on. I think it's that. It might actually be when all 3 or all of the refresh cards are on the table that triggers. I can't quite remember. Anyway, yeah, and then all the planets have these amazing colors and this amazing design, and the colors are also reflected on the base of the planet, because some of the marbles are a little hard to distinguish, but then those colors are borderline irrelevant. Like, as far as I can tell, they only matter to your starting objective. So you get 4 starting objective cards, and everyone gets the same 4, and everyone picks 1. And the cards are all... The 4 cards are the 4 colors on the planets. So you can see in the planet closest in the photo here is 3 colors. It's green, red, and yellow. There's also blue. Those are the 4 colors that the planets might be. Sometimes they're 1 color. Sometimes they're all 4 colors. Or any combination in the middle. But you'll have got this private objective, which is for the red private objective is control 2 red planets. So that just means have an extractor on 2 red planets. The minute you achieve that, you turn that card in, you get 2 light. If it's, I think, like that, and then it escalates. So then for one of the other planets, it's going to be control 5 of this color, and then get, bonanza of light. And that's, I think, the only purpose to the color of the planets at all. The main important thing of the planets is the resource that they produce, which is on the randomly assigned exploration token. So, in theory, I really like this. I really like the idea. I mean, I hate the Gray Fox production. It's gorgeous. Okay, for a start, incredible table presence. The miniatures are all different. what I mean is like the 3 or 4 or 6 factions that you've got, they all have different sculpts. That's great. The extractors are tiny and fiddly and annoying. Setting up the exploration tokens on the base of the planets is kind of annoying. It's even more annoying that they didn't create some kind of recessed base, because the the base of the planet having the colors on it is only relevant to those secret objectives. And I think the secret objectives seem less important than they are. I actually think it's probably quite important to have this secret objective that's worth a bunch of points to sort of keep people invested in the game if someone's a runaway leader. But this is where I'm coming into it. My one play of this, I got super lucky on exploration tokens really early on. Not just that, I got super lucky on starting technology, and I had a race that gave me light for a common resource. I could just spend a common resource and get a light. And I won this in like 3 refreshes. So about 6 rounds of gameplay, right? If a round is the playing of the 5 cards, and it's asymmetrical and it's asynchronous, so it's not really accurate. But we played 3 full refreshes, and my opponents were on like 5 and 7 light, and I was on 20, and I just won. Because I got an extra ship early, I had technologies that let me move them quicker, and I was just able to sort of accelerate my engine, my 4x exploration, way faster. So I had ships right in the middle. And this is why yellow has beelined into the middle to kill me, because I had such a runaway lead so quickly. But it didn't matter, because there's not really any way to take away someone's light. So long as they can still get some, they can pretty much limp over the finishing line, even if they lose their entire fleet. And it doesn't feel super bad to lose your ships. I mean, I do think you need to be on the ball with what's going on with people. I don't think you can just it's a very short game. Because it's 4x, it's sort of super accelerated, right? So like what we saw here was this like really asymmetrical start where I got off to this running start, which meant that I think the other players were really, it was incumbent upon them to like gang up on me as early as humanly possible, and they just didn't grok it because none of us had played it before. We didn't even realize sort of how big an advantage I had until it was already like too late to fix it. But I think if I was to play this again, I'd say just be mindful to keep your eye on what's going on with other people. If someone's getting sort of close, because I was saying to them like, I'm on 7 light, I'm on 8 light, I'm on 9 light, I'm on 10 light, but they just didn't know what they could do about it. And I'd say like keep your eyes on other players. Because it's a 4x game, it's got that targeted player interaction. You're gonna have to gang up on the leader. You're gonna have to sort of play alliances and things like that. There's no formal rules for that. It's just you know um, ad hoc alliances as and when you need to balance the board state and take down a leader, right? So I really, really want to play it again. I really enjoyed the pace of it. I really liked how fast it was. I really like how it captured that feeling of 4X, and I really like how much asymmetry and complexity and sort of upgrading and sort of how many cards we sort of played and how many things we upgraded and got in such a short space of time. Like I thought that was really, really good, but fundamentally the one game we had of it was not really great because it was over really quickly and it was a unassailable lead. Um, so I don't know if that was a fair representation. The one thing I'd say is that it was over so quickly that we could easily have played it again, and it wasn't so long that that felt really, really bad. Like if the game had been very long and I'd won because I just got this really lucky start, that would feel pretty bad for everyone else. But because it was shorter, it was less of an issue. Um, the other thing I would say about this is that if I can remember what I was gonna say, um, it's I can't remember what I was gonna say. So I'll maybe have to come back to that. But yeah, it's I guess it's just a pity that Gray Fox have kind of dropped the ball in the production again because this was really expensive, and it just kind of feels like parts of it are like the fiddliness of the extractors is really annoying. The I think that the planet bases could have had space for those exploration tokens because they need to have them, and those tokens remain on those bases for the whole game. But it is very, very short. Like, it is going to be 60 minutes at most. Yeah, and just, I guess, yeah. Oh, yeah, the other thing, that's what I was going to say. I was just going to say, if you do get a chance to play this and you're teaching it to people, just make sure to say, like, look, this has got all of those elements you're familiar with from 4X games, but it's not, but it's highly accelerated, and you can't expect the pace of those games. Because, like, I sort of saw us as a group settle into this for, like, the long haul. Like, you could just kind of tell everyone was kind of building their tableau and doing their researches. And, you know, even though the game was moving at a really rapid pace, you know, at some point, I guess about 15, 20 minutes in, I was like, I'm halfway to victory. You know, and everyone's like, what? You know, caught really by surprise. And I don't think it will be that fast every time. Like I said, that was my sort of crazy combo of good starting elements. But, and that was a bunch of sort of quite particular things triggering, like finding a good exploration token, finding a good starting planet, having a good alien power ability, having the right technologies in my hand at the start. You know, all of those things sort of coming off in sort of perfect synchronicity. But I do think you do have to give people like a heads up. This is not Eclipse. You know, it's not your big long 4X. It's going to be really, really quick. So don't you going and exploring the territories near your home base is like a big decision, because that's going to take up a lot of time. You want to get into the middle of the board as quickly as you can, because that's where the light comes from, and that's what people need to win. And if you let someone just get in there unharassed, they're probably just going to win, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, keen to play it some more, but also like super expensive and kind of annoyed about the production. They made some promo planetary exploration tiles that are just straight up bigger than the other tiles. So they're really powerful as well. They're like sort of wild planetary exploration. They're really, really good. And when you put them on the base of the planet with the other tokens, they're just obviously bigger. So everyone's just going to go for that planet. So you can't really use them. It's so annoying. Like, come on, Grey Fox. Get it together. Tsukiyumi was another one from them that was just all over the shop. So that's why they've got priors. Anyway, moving on to Anunnaki. I don't know if you guys saw, I've been playing this solo on the channel. I played it solo twice now. And I also dual-handed a game. I really liked it in theory. I wanted to play it with real people, and I kind of got my wish. This was the last sort of big game we played on the Sunday, and I got to play half of it, because then our third player had to go home. So I still have not played this properly with real people. It's interesting, actually, that we ended on the 2 4X games as well. This is also actually a surprisingly quick game to play. I'm going to have to delete some more photos to make room. Bear with me here. And when I say quick, I mean it doesn't last that long, and also the downtime is really low. Oh, thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. So in Anunnaki, you are again, it's kind of sci-fi. This is based on some kind of real world conspiracy theory that I'm just not au fait with. I think I've mentioned that when I played it before. But effectively, the idea is, what if the ancient pantheons of Earth were in fact alien races that are summoned from space through ritual? So they kind of have followers that are the indigenous people on planets, and then those people summon the gods, and they actually possess the bodies of their followers and come out and control the planets. So I'm going to show you a quick photo here. This one. Look at this. This is a 3-player game. This is an extraordinary amount of table space. This game is such a table hog. It's such a massive table hog. Also, I get so excited to start talking about the game, I forget to do my due diligence. So here it is. Anunnaki was crowdfunded through Kickstarter by Cranio Creations. It is designed by Simone Luciani and Danilo Sabbia. Simone Luciani is a well-known, well-regarded designer who has only done collaborations and has done a great many of them, including Marco Polo, Tzolk'in, Barrage, and Grand Austria Hotel. Danilo Sabbia is a relatively new designer who's only got, as far as I can tell, 2 credits to their name, which is Anunnaki and also The Rats of Wistar, which is another collaboration with Luciano, published by Cranio Creations this year, but not via crowdfunding. And in Anunnaki, again, you are, it's a 4X game. You are this race of alien gods. You're going to be, you start on one of these 4 planets. Everyone starts on their own planet. And then there's Earth, which is the big planet board in the middle there. And we're all kind of trying to get to Earth. And Earth has, oh, you need such a big table to play this, Ralph. Earth has got the ancient Atlanteans on it, which are a big prize as well if you can go and defeat the ancient Atlanteans. But this is a points bonanza. Did I get a picture of the... Nope. Did I get a picture of the tracks? I did not. Sadly, you can't really see it, but there's actually the sideways board in the top left of this photo are the 4 tracks that represent the various advances of your civilization. So you've got on there a war track, a development track, which is your technologies or a abstraction of technological advancement. You've got your trade track, which represents trade with all the different races around the galaxy. And then you've got at the bottom a domination track, which is kind of an abstraction of just how well you're doing. Lots of endgame points come from those tracks, but there's also the possibility to get endgame points from your deities. Every team is made up of a bunch of little followers, one main god, and a bunch of deities in the middle. Minor deities, and those minor deities have asymmetrical powers which you draft at the start of the game, and some of them might be endgame scoring if you get those guys out. I'm trying to remember where all the endgame scoring comes from. It's actually mostly scored during the game, I think, and those tracks that I described are the majority of the endgame scoring. But every faction is asymmetrical, slightly asymmetrical. I mean, the actions are the same, and the basic play is the same, but you've got an asymmetrical god powers and minor god powers and all that stuff. And in the core game, you're going to get 4 different gods, 4 different pantheons. You've got the ancient Greek gods, you've got the ancient Egyptian gods, you've got the Norse gods, and you've got the Mesopotamian gods. And then if you have the big Kickstarter Bonanza box, you'll also get the Japanese gods and another faction, but I forgot what they are. And there's some more expansions in there. I haven't looked at any of it. I bought this on Kickstarter. I backed it on Kickstarter. And I got the full big Bonanza box, but I haven't looked at any of the expansion content. But functionally what you're doing in this game is you're expanding onto these planets, you're exploiting the resources, and you're fighting with other people, and everything feels incredibly Euro. It's super Euro. Like Last Light is sort of random goodies, loads of stuff, like so much abundance. What are you going to do with it all? And dice combat, and if you don't play your command card, you don't even get to fight. Whereas in this, it's like couldn't be more Euro, super Euro. Resources are really hard to come by, super scarce. You don't feel like a grand god so much as a sort of a slow, like developing civilization, I guess. This is a sideways photo of the player board. Sorry, it's sideways. Can I rotate it here? I'm going to rotate it, and then every other photo is going to be wrong, so I'm just going to leave it. But this is the sort of the core puzzle of your round-to-round turn. Like on a turn, you get to do 3 sort of actions, right? You get your main action, which are these tiles you can see here, the blue and red ones. And then you get to do a mana action if you have mana and resources, because mana actions cost mana and resources. So then you may do one of those if you can afford it and you want to. And then you get to do a final additional action, it's called, which is one of two things. You can summon a god if you've managed to solve the puzzle to summon a god, and you can complete a contract if you pay the resources to do that. One contract if you've got a contract. And if you so to summon a god, that's kind of the main puzzle of this action selection mechanism here, because you've got a little pawn that is actually not on this board. I must have taken this photo after I moved it. But you've got a little pawn that moves around on these tiles here, and during your action phase, you can jump to any action you want. And the actions are, triggering all kinds of different things, but fundamentally there's like move, and there's exploit the resources, get some contracts, get some more followers on the board, etc., etc. But on your turn, you have to move the pawn, and you can move it to any tile you want. But if it moves to an adjacent tile, it will follow the lines you can see connecting them. And you can see the big circle around the outside. And if you move along those lines, you'll get 2 mana, which means you're going to have access to those mana actions. And that's really good. But then you put one of your little summoning cubes in it, which you can see here. I've got a bunch of summoning cubes out. But on each track connecting the action spaces, there's a little divot, and you put your summoning cubes in the divots. And that's one of the 2 ways the game can end. If a player runs out of all 14 summoning cubes by putting them all on the player board, they'll trigger game end. The other way is if they make it all the way to the end of one of those tracks I spoke about earlier. So you get to the end of the war track, or the development track, or the trade track. You get to the end of that track and you trigger game end. So you put your summoning cubes into the divots, and then you get mana stones. You get the most mana stones by going around the outside, but the main thing is that that's not useful for summoning your gods. So then you can see inside the circle is a pentagram, and the pentagram, the points of the stars are made up of 3 divots connecting the 3 actions, and within that is a triangle. If you move along those lines, so that means you're taking actions adjacent to other actions that you've already taken, you get to put the cubes in the divots, and then when you complete all 3 divots, you can summon the god. So you can see here on the lower left, I've put all 3 in one of the triangle spikes points, and then the token in the center is missing because it's gone and summoned a god. But the token above it is still there because I haven't completed one side, so I can't summon that god. And if you want to summon your grand deity, which you definitely want to do because you won't win the game if you don't summon your grand deity, and so, well, actually that's not true. You could win without summoning it. You don't need to, but it's probably a really good thing to do. You have to go around the inside, right? And the trade-off of going around the inside is that none of those divots have mana in them. So you track around the inside and you don't get the mana and you don't get the extra actions, and that's a real pain in the ass. So that's the puzzle, right? You want to do the actions, but then you're limited about where you're going to go because you want to put out the stones, because you want the mana, but then you also want to summon the gods, and you have to follow the specific tracks to do that. That is the action puzzle that forms the core of this game. And actually, the game is really, once you get into the flow of it, the turns are so fast. They're super duper quick. Just boom, 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 boom. We're playing this so fast. I mean, we were under pressure. We were trying to get it done in like 90 minutes. And we played it, I think, for a solid hour and probably got just over halfway through the game, which is pretty good. It's really, really quick. I was really surprised. Like, there is some weirdness going on. The combat is super deterministic. The way the combat works is that every player's got 2 blue defense cards that are always in their hand, but you can't play them on attack. And then you can buy red attack cards. They're quite expensive, and then they might have an additional cost to play them. And the main reason you're playing attack cards is because they're worth points and spaces on the war track. So then you get to move up that war track, and that's great. But it's quite calculational, and typically players only go into a fight that they know they're going to win. So it's not like the exciting combat in something like Last Light or whatever. Difter says it looks like setting up the game and putting it back in the box might take longer than playing it. Actually, do you know what? For what it's worth, the setup trays that they've put in the box for this are really good. Like, it's very rare to have a good insert. This has actually got a good insert. The box is enormous. it's the Kickstarter box is so big. Um, and it's got 2 expansions that I'm probably never going to look at in it, but I probably should have just had the retail. I think you'd be fine with the retail. I don't know why I didn't get the retail. Or not the retail, but the core box with just 2 trays in it. Now I've got 4 trays, 2 trays of expansion stuff, one of which is an ongoing campaign mode. Come on. I am glad to have the other 2 factions though, which you can just port into the core game. Anyway, the point I was going to make about the combat is that it's not exciting. It's very calculational. You also feel very, very tight on resources in this game. Like, you never feel like you've got an abundance of resources. Again, it's very calculational. There's a lot of there's a lot of sort of minor combos, right? Like, it's nice to get a little minor mana action. It's nice to be able to trigger a contract, which might get you another mana stone and another little bonus action. But you're never sort of trigger comboing into action after action after action, or chaining them for very long. And even when you do chain them, they kind of resolve quite quickly, and they're relatively like, it's stuff like get to put out an extra settlement or have 2 more followers or something like that. But I do like how fast it plays, and I do like how crunchy it is given the speed it plays at. But do you know what I think it actually most feels like? It most feels like Scythe. Like, it feels like a Scythe, or even a Brazil Imperial. If you played either of those, it's got that kind of feel to it. But I actually think I like it better than either of those. It's just a shame that it's like way more expensive. I actually don't know if it's more expensive than Scythe. Scythe's pretty expensive. Scythe's my least favorite of these 3, by the way. But just personally, like subjectively, I'm not going to go into why here, but I just FYI to let you know. But the table space is just excruciating. And the other thing is, Cranio keep doing these double layer boards. They did it for Barrage too, and they can't seem to get them to be flat. Like, the player boards are already like curling at the edges, and it's just like, why can't you get proper cardboard? Like, Board and Dice did it for Nucleum. They're just fine. But yeah, I haven't actually finished a game of this with real people, and so to form up my opinion, I'd like to do that. But what I've seen of it, having played it twice solo, dual-handed it, and now played half a game with 3 people, I actually think it's really cool. I don't think it's for everyone. Like I said, it's sort of 4Xy, but it's not exciting. There's no dramatic reveals. I mean, there's a few minorly dramatic reveals, maybe, but it's primarily very sort of calculational. But there's more scope for getting up in people's faces and sort of taking territories and player interaction. There's a lot more scope in this for that than there is in Brazil Imperial or Scythe. So it definitely has more of that going on. And controlling the territories is quite important to endgame scoring. You've got those 4 tracks I talked about. The domination track is a bit different to the other 3, but they're all important, and they're all controlled by 4 tokens. So there's 4 tokens that are these objective criteria, and they're randomly assigned to each track at the start of the game. And 2 of the tokens, one is the number of territories you control divided by 2, and the other objective is territories that contain shrines. So both of these want players to sort of expand into those matching territories, and so there's going to be player contention there as the game goes on, which I think is quite good. Like, for example, as well, the Greek player in our game, the Greeks' ability is that when a culture token is resolved on a planet, in normal rules, if you're adjacent to the token, you're going to get a bonus. So there's these tokens, and when all the territories around them are controlled by players, the token is resolved, and everyone who controls at least one territory next to it gets a benefit. But the Greeks get a benefit even if they're just present on the planet. So they don't need to be next to the token, right? That's the thing. They just need to be there. And then if the token's resolved, they get the benefit. So the Greek player immediately sent a little follower over to my planet and over to the other player's planet. And because we were playing quite quickly, he didn't really think about it, and he didn't really look, but he put them both on shrines, which are quite desirable spaces. And so immediately me and the other player were like, oh, we've got to kick this Greek guy off our planet. Not because we don't want him to have the culture benefits, but because we want those shrines. Like, they're quite important. And then that triggered warfare, and it was pretty fun. But yeah, the other thing is that those big green cards you can see right in the middle of the photo are the Atlantean cards, and they're rare artifacts. You get them when you defeat the Atlanteans, who are sort of a, a non-player army on the board, and those cards can be really powerful, and there's at least one that's quite feel bad. I did show them. We never got to see them in our game because we didn't get to Atlantis, but I did show them to the other players, and they seemed to agree that actually it wasn't a big deal. But I was a little concerned that it might have been a bit too feel bad or a bit too much of a big deal. But they didn't. They weren't too concerned about them, so that was good. So yeah, I'm keen to play it with real people again, but still haven't had a chance. Well, that's what we get for late night streaming. I am back for the final game of the night. I just, in case we missed it, I don't know if it came through, but I was going to say after my solo plays of Anunnaki, I was pessimistic I would enjoy it as much as I did with real people. So Anunnaki actually remarkably, it surprised me. And maybe that's because I had lowered my expectations after the solo plays. I was like, I think this is a good puzzle, but I'm not sure how it's going to be with real people. But yeah, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. So keen to actually get a full game of that in when I can, because I came away from it really positive. Final game of the night is Jerusalem Anno Domini from Devere Games, and first time designer, I think it's Carmen Jimenez. Yeah, Carmen Jimenez. And with art by Enrique Corominas and Ladroz. So I had been interested in this. I got a review copy from Thames Cosmos, who distribute Devere games in the UK. I got a review copy from it at UKG this year in June 2023. And it's a Euro game, and it's about the Last Supper, and fundamentally it's sort of about like card play in order to you start with a camp full of followers, and you want to get the followers into the Last Supper to meet Jesus. So here is the Last Supper. Boom, there it is. See that big token in the middle? That's Jesus. And then everyone else are the apostles, and the other big meeples are the apostles. And then all the little colored meeples are our followers. And we're trying to get them out of our camps on our player boards into locations on the game board, where from there they can move into these spaces around the Last Supper. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points for being close to good apostles and also Jesus. And if you see that silver apostle in the on the right of Jesus, the top row to the right of Jesus with no one behind them, that's Judas, and nobody wanted to be near Judas because he's a big traitor. So that's why that happened. And it's a kind of an odd game. I wish I'd taken a photo of the player board here for you. But basically you start with this deck of cards, and I thought it was going to be more like a deck builder, but it's not. So you've got a deck of cards, and each card has two actions on it. It's got a symbol in the top right, left. It's got actually, do I have it here? Yeah, I do. Maybe I'll show you a card. That'll just be easier to explain. But it's on your turn. You play a single card and resolve that card, and then you get to do the actions on the card, and then that's it. But, well, and then you get to do some other maybe little bonus actions, and then that's the end of your turn. And so the turns are reasonably quick, not as quick as I would have liked given the weight of the game, but yeah. So the where's my camera? There it is. So we've got our card here. This is a red player's basic starting card. You've got these icons in the top left and then actions in the bottom middle, right? And then you've got some points up in the upper right as well. And the red dot just means this is red player's card. Here's another one. This also gives you a bread resource. And so what you've got actually are you are playing these cards out to your player board. And when you play them out, you sort of layer them on top of each other. You've got 3 spaces where you can build these sets of cards. And so on your turn, you play just one card, and you play it on top of an existing stack to create a developing row, a developing column, or you play it into a new space, empty space on your player board, and start a new column. And what you want to do is try to create sets of these symbols in the upper left, which trigger both an action, but also the sets can be traded in to trigger the apostles. And when you trade in the set to trigger apostle, you get these points here as these numbers here as victory points, and then you also get to move one of the apostles over to the Last Supper. And once all of in here you can see all of the seats at the table are taken by the apostles. And when all of the apostles move over there, then they trigger the final sort of stage of the game. The game actually ends where this token called the Sahedron marker gets to the top of its track, at which point Jesus is crucified. And when the seats at the table are all taken by the apostles, then that track starts to move up much more rapidly. So it sort of accelerates the end game rather than ending it immediately. And then there are all these actions where you're sending meeples out to locations on the board, and based on their positioning, they'll get you those resources, but you have to keep them in a warehouse on your player board, and then the warehouse spaces are opening up as you play, so you can hold more resources, and then you use those resources to take up those spots at the Last Supper. There you can see resources all around the outside. The 3 resources are, of course, stone, bread, and fish. And based on the positioning, you'll have to pay a price for the row and the at the bottom of the row and the side of the column. So if we look at the red meeple in the bottom left side, sort of at the bottom of the row, there he costs 1 stone and 1 fish to put out there. And then some of them have benefits on them as well. So you put down there, you get points. There are 2 more powerful kinds of action cards you can draft from the player board. And they go directly into your hand. And then you play them onto your player board just like the other cards. But when you resolve the stack of cards to put the apostle out, then the cards that are special go back to the bottom of the stacks on the player board instead of into your discard. So this led to some really and then the game can also end if somebody gets all of their followers onto the Last Supper. That could also trigger the end game, but none of us came close to that. This game didn't manifest the way I thought it would. There was one mechanism I really quite liked, which is that everyone starts with favor tiles. You get about 8 favor tiles. And on one side are resources, and on the reverse are those icons, like the ones I showed you on the cards. So there's 4 of those icons, right? There's the menorah, and then there's also mountains, desert, and lake. And you're trying to get 3 of them in a specific order, 3 specific symbols in a specific order to trigger the apostles. So if you get them in the wrong order, you'll have to take an action to rearrange the cards and put them in the right order, and those actions are quite hard to come by. But I thought this was going to be more like a deck builder, more like building the action decks like in Lacrimosa. But actually, because the cards come into your hand immediately when you acquire them and then go back to the board when you discard them, it's not a deck builder at all. So it's more like action selection. And then you can purchase one of these special action cards at the end of your turn for 2 denarii. And you get that opportunity every turn. You might not always be able to afford it, but if you did manage to get a card either during the turn or buy a card, then at the end of your turn you won't draw one of your basic cards. So actually over the course of the game, despite the fact we only have 10 basic cards in our deck, I only drew 3 of them over the course of the whole game, which felt peculiar, or at least just unintuitive, which is fine. That's not a problem inherently. So the favor action I really like. We get these 8 favor tokens, and then if you take the favor action, you give one of those tokens to one of the other players, and then they get the resources shown on the tile, and then they flip it over and they can use it as a symbol to complete their sets of cards for the apostles. Additionally, when they do use it to complete their sets, they can insert it anywhere in the column, so it doesn't need to be in order like the cards do, which is cool. I like that mechanism a lot, and I really enjoyed the deliberation because as you go up the favor track, you get increasingly more points. Additionally, when you go up the favor track, you get to draw one of the 33 AD cards, which are very powerful. So you get more powerful cards in your hand, and you get more points as well, but you have to give away these tokens to other players, and you're not really sure how good they are. Spoiler alert, the 2 players who received the most favor tokens had the best scores, so I think they are quite important. But I liked that dilemma, especially in the Eurogamer brain of, oh, I'm getting a bunch of points now, but I'm giving my opponent an advantage, and I'm not sure how much that's going to help them. I liked that a lot. I had hoped there would be more positioning going on around the Last Supper, the area you can see here on the photo. There are some cards that allow you to change position, so you can take one of your followers who's already at the Last Supper and move them to a different empty space. And there's the white apostles. When you put them out, every time you put out an apostle, you get an apostle's favor special power, and the purple ones will give you something. I forgot what the purple ones give you. The orange ones immediately score their column, so you could potentially get quite a lot of points during the game if you manage to line up the orange ones with a bunch of your meeples already, which is quite good. Right, the purple ones let you immediately invite someone to the Last Supper, and being invited to the Last Supper is better than attending it because you don't have to pay the resource cost for the space you take. So it's like they give you an invitation, you just get to add a follower for free. And then the white ones, their apostle power is when you put them out, you can swap places between one of your followers and one of the opponent's followers. So you can go and grab that spot right by Jesus if you want to. And I really liked that part of it, and I'd really hoped that this aspect of the game would be a lot more prevalent. Ways to sort of move entire rows or entire columns, and way to move the followers around in a much more dynamic way. Unfortunately, the movement didn't manifest as much as I would have hoped it would. And then there's a lot of other sort of minor Euro-y things going on. So, and then there's Judas as well. You can put Judas out at any time. But when you do, the power Judas gives you is he just gives you 5 coins, which is not actually that much in the game, really. It's okay. It's not an astronomical amount. And then he's also minus 5 points. So if you're in the row behind him, you don't want to be there. But really, I think it'd be quite unusual for you to be able to sabotage people with Judas, because people don't really line up their followers in rows where there are no apostles. And I think the only way you could sort of get someone with Judas is either if you put him out before the white apostles, and then you put your people next to Judas, and then you swapped people into that position, which is quite logistically difficult. Also, there are the head of the table spaces, which are the 4 meeples you can see around the outside. Now, we played a 3-player game, which is why the green players' pieces are blocking off spaces. At 4 players, none of those spaces would be blocked. But you can see that the 4 spaces on the corners of the tables, and you start with your pieces there. I have actually got 2 on the head of the table because the yellow player swapped out his for one of mine, using one of the white apostles. But if you could get Judas on the end of the table there next to someone's starting piece, that would be another way to sabotage them with Judas. But fundamentally, like, this just didn't have as much dynamic movement and sort of player interaction and interplay as I would have liked, because it does seem to be the core focus of the game. In addition to this, there are the three locations where meeples exist. You have to move your followers from your player board into those locations. That costs money. You have a maximum number you can have at each location, and in addition to that, the locations are also capped, so not every player can get their max out. Um, which is a nice, interesting sort of little dynamic of sort of spatial control. Towards the end of the game, all three locations were constantly full, and getting spaces in there was quite a contentious thing, which I liked. There's also a set collection around parables. You know, it's themed around the parables of the Bible. Um, so each you get tokens, and there's a parable action, and you just go and collect a parable token, and then you can collect all 9 Bible stories and get a set collection bonus. There's the Sanhedrin track, which are the council of the Jews who are going to crucify Jesus, and a token moves up there, and at certain points it triggers scoring conditions, and if it triggers it because you moved it, you get big points, and everyone else gets a little bit of points. So if you've got one of those conditions that you've done quite well on, you want to make sure you trigger it on your turn. That's cool. But none of it, the thing is, the card play was really peculiar. Like, what was really interesting was that I was the blue player. Me and the red player, we had almost no trouble making sets and triggering apostles. And when you trigger the apostles, that's where you're going to get the big points. Most of your points come from the apostles. I'd say 2/3 of your points come from the apostles, and then 1/3 comes from the end game scoring around the table with Jesus. Um, but if you do well on triggering an apostle during the game, you can get 12 points from the cards, and then and it's going to be between sort of 7 and 12 points from the cards, and then you can get, you know, like I don't know, if you put out the orange ones, you can get another 5 points, maybe even 9 points if you've been really clever about it. So there's quite a lot of points for that. And then there's, of course, there is 12 apostles. You do get apostle points for putting out Judas as well. So that's, you know, that's potentially quite a lot of points on offer there to be divided up. So one player, the yellow player, really struggled to make the sets. And I don't know if it's because he had less favor tokens than us, or if it was, which is not probably accurate, because I didn't actually use my favorite tokens right up until the end, and I had one I didn't even use at all. But he said that in his starting hand, he didn't have any of the cards that matched the first symbol in the sets he needed to make to score the apostles. So he had to start off the 3 columns on his player board with the wrong symbols, which meant he then needed to rearrange all of those, and the rearranging action is quite hard to come by, and that really stalled out his sort of gaining of the apostle points. Now, if he'd played a second time, I don't know if this was sort of a mistake, not realizing how the system worked early enough, or if it was simply a very bad hand, but either way, you know, that was either way, I mentioned it only because me and the red player found making the apostle sets incredibly easy, almost effortless. I found it so easy to do. And then the card play was very sort of very opportunistic and immediate. Like I wasn't planning on very much. I just sort of, every turn I'd buy a card, or I'd wind up taking a favor action, or a market action that lets you get more cards into your hand, and I just have a handful of cards, and I'd have to discard down to the hand limit. I think you have to, but whatever you have to do, we did it correctly. I just can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But it just the card play was just sort of very, like, I never felt like I was really pursuing specific actions. I was always pursuing the apostle symbols to get those points from turning in sets. And even if all the apostles have come out, you still get the points from turning in the sets. Which I think is, you know, so, you know, those sets are like 12 points, right? So at the end of the game, the winning score was like 130, I think. So, you know, those 12-point chunks are pretty important. There's not a huge amount of end game scoring, and the vast majority of it, the rows, are the columns here on the Last Supper board. area. Um, so yeah, I just didn't feel like I had a whole lot of sort of dynamic agency over the actions I was taking, and it didn't feel like any of them were, other than the apostle triggering and getting followers into the Last Supper, were particularly important. Like the favor track, I like the mechanism, didn't feel very important to do. The parables track, I almost largely ignored. Um, and this board here just didn't feel dynamic enough to really hold interest. So after sort of one play of this, I'm pretty confident I'm done with it. Um, which is a pity because I think there's a lot of promise here. I think this sort of idea of getting, I think the idea of having followers around the Last Supper table is really interesting. I think it's hilarious actually because it feels like you're jostling to see, Mick Jagger at a gig or something, right? You're like the audience at a concert and you're all pushing each other out of the way and trying to get in the way. And it just feels like a really funny idea. Definitely not the designer's intent. I don't know, like she's not the the game is not super preachy, but also it's also not devoid of sort of intent to share the story of Jesus. There are quite a lot of sort of chunks of the rules where it's sort of explaining why the mechanisms work this way because of the way the story is, or the part of the Bible it's trying to sort of evoke. And I think if you're really religious, or you're really into theology, you might find some of this theme sort of not interesting, but sort of it might draw you into the game in a way it doesn't draw in people who are religious or don't know the Bible or don't care. Um, but I don't think that I definitely think if you're also an atheist who finds the sort of the very religious tones off-putting, then it's definitely going to be off-putting. It's not subtle at all. Um, I heard criticism that actually the mechanisms felt like they had been sort of manipulated to promote the religious themes, and I don't think that's true. I mean, they're actually not very complex. There's some basic set collection. There's sort of this track of asymmetrical objectives that are going to be scored over time. There's a marketplace where you trade goods for money or money for goods. There's a warehouse to manage, and then you're playing this sort of positioning game on this board here. It's nothing unfamiliar here, right? What's most weird is the deck of cards, because I can't think of a game where you have a deck of cards that you're playing through. So like a deck of basic cards that are going into that you're drawing into your hand, that you're playing, that are going into your discard. Eventually your discard will reshuffle. I can't see how that could ever happen, because all the best action cards are the ones that you don't start with, and they never go into your deck. They never get shuffled. They always go back to the player board after they're played and resolved. So it's so bizarre. And it feels a bit like they couldn't quite decide whether it was going to be a deck builder or not. Um, hey, Chris is here in chat. And I see Logan as well says, "Dang, I was interested in trying to pick this up. Maybe worth picking up on sale." Logan, I wouldn't even bother. I mean, the price aside, like it wasn't particularly cheap, and there's also about 2 hours of stickering to do if you want to do all the stickers. You don't have to. You don't need to do the stickers to play. Um, but and they do make the game look really nice. Like the stickers are good, the pieces look nice, but fundamentally I don't think it comes together in a way that's going to be interesting enough to justify not even the time to learn, because it's actually not that difficult to learn. Like we learned it from the rule book pretty quick, and we're off playing it pretty fast. And given that it was the last game at like midnight on the Sunday, that's pretty high praise actually, that we could access it so quickly and easily, especially given that the rule book had passages with like sort of quasi religious theology in it to explain what the mechanisms were. Not quasi. What I mean is, like maybe just a little bit too much religious theology explaining why this mechanism was this way. But so I'm just like sort of skipping that, trying to get to how the mechanism works. But you know, um, so it's reasonably accessible. I just the thing is, it's not short. It's probably like it does say 90 minutes here on BGG. I think that's pretty bang on. I think at 3 players who hadn't played before, we played it in about 90 minutes. Um, but I just don't think it's worth that time. There's so many better 90-minute Euro games. Um, yeah. Yeah, Chris says, as an atheist with interest in and good biblical knowledge, I was interested, but mechanically I was bored by how to play video. Yeah, sounds about right. There just wasn't a sort of a mechanism in here that grabbed me and held my interest. Um, and I think that if there'd been maybe fewer sort of token action spaces, like I like the favor action space, I like that mechanism, but it wasn't really. I mean, I actually think that could stay, but you could take out the Sahedrin track, and put in another game timer. Like it just ends when all the apostles are out, or the apostles come out, play one more round, and then it ends. And take out the parable track set collection thing. That's completely pointless, and it wasn't interesting. Um, and then put in some more actions that allow you to manipulate this board in a more dynamic way. That would be, I think, much more interesting. Um, and the final thing is that the actual Sahedrin track is on an odd timer. So like you some players will play cards that advance it over the course of the game, and then when the final apostle comes out, then it ticks up on everyone's turn, but you can still play those cards. So the way the game played out, we played an equal number of turns. It ended at the end of my turn, or it ends at the beginning of someone's turn, actually, when the minute the token hits the final space. So it went to the back to the first player, the token went to the end of the track, and the game ended. But actually the penultimate player, yellow player, realized he had a card in hand that could have advanced the token, which would have ended the game before my turn took place, which would have meant that I was third player. I had one less turn than everyone else, and furthermore I got about 10 points on my final turn, which actually let me win the game. So if the yellow player had played that card, I would have come second, and I would have had one less turn than everyone else. Now, I do have some agency over that because I did decide to put out the final apostle, which triggered that endgame drive, but there's also the Sahedrin cards that trigger the Sahedrin track, which are making it uneven and unpredictable. And I just think that's really unsatisfying, especially after 90 minutes of Eurogame, to have uneven turns. It just doesn't feel very good, especially like, I mean, in a game where the sort of the it feels like you have a lot of agency over the length of it, that's fine. But the way the game sort of automates the game length once you sort of meet the final condition, but then you can still accelerate it even further. Just but you can only really, you can't, it's hard to time it right to punish the leader, so it could just wind up punishing someone. Um, that just felt kind of like an odd decision to me. Um, Chris says you might get more out of it by engaging with the explanations in the rulebook. I mean, I don't know. I was talking to a buddy of mine who was at the con, actually, who was also there and watching us play it because he's really interested in what we thought of it. And um, he's an ex priest, and he wasn't into the game either. So I don't know. He was like, I didn't want to color your opinions by saying anything, but I thought that some of the Bible quotes they chose were a bit weird, and I wasn't really into it either. But that's hearsay. I couldn't say because I don't know the religious quotes and the passages they've used well enough. But I mean, fundamentally, the mechanisms aren't compelling enough to justify it anyway. Um, so that's Jerusalem, the final game of the convention. Clearly, when it comes to our Euro game endeavors, we peaked too early because we played Federation first, and that was, I think, our favorite Euro game of the whole convention. Um, and then we played Jerusalem at the end. But we got some good highlights in there, including our interesting 4X experiences, and of course the ever good, ever great Guards of Atlantis II. So I think I'm going to wrap up the stream here, but thanks everyone so much for watching. I hope you found this information useful and interesting. I hope I've given you some new games that you'd be excited to check out. Definitely, if you do get a chance to play Guards, if you get a chance to check out Last Light, Among Cultists, Federation, or Anunnaki, I definitely recommend giving those a shot if the opportunity arises. I think they'll all be interesting. I definitely think Among Cultists, in particular, is one that want and also Guards of Atlantis are definitely games that want multiple plays to get the most out of them. And go grab yourself a copy of Mindbug because it's absolutely excellent and it's real cheap. I did about 15 minutes per game. That's not too bad, Difter, all things considered. Anyway, thanks everyone so much for watching, and thanks again to all the patrons who support the show and keep this stuff independent. As Brian says, your, what did he say? Honest, not honest, genuine insight. There we go. Sincere perspectives. There we go. Thanks to the patrons who enable us to keep our perspectives sincere. We'll see you all in the next stream. I'll be back for something on Thursday, and then maybe something next week. Something different next week. We'll see. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for watching.